بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My respected brothers and sisters, Alhamdulillah, my name is Liaquat Zaman. Inshallah, I will be delivering the report regarding the rise and the fall of the Christians. As I mentioned earlier, this course is really designed for 9 hours. There's lots of information I will go through. And 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, I delivered this course very close by in Karachi. I did it in, I think, maybe 1.5 hours. But this time, 4 hours, inshallah. So if you have any questions, please note down your questions so you can ask me whilst I am delivering the talk, inshallah. If I do say something which does not make sense, please ask me. Inshallah, I will try to repeat it also. So, before we try to understand history, what I want to first of all ask is, why do we study history? What is the purpose of studying history? Does anybody have an idea of why we study history? As Muslims, why do we study history? No more passion. So you learn the past, very good. Anything else why we study history? Know how people in the past existed before, very good. Anything else? Understand the mistakes that made them. Excellent. Those are very good points. Understand the mistakes that were made by the previous nations and people. We do not repeat those mistakes again. Now, I have listed over here 4 points which I have collected from various books. Hopefully, inshallah, I will at the end of the talk, I will give you a list of books that I use. And these books are predominantly in the English language. Some of them originally were in Arabic or Urdu, but most of them we find in English language. The reason I read these books was because when we live in a society that's dominated by Western ideology, Western thoughts, you have to understand how the Western mind sees history. But unfortunately, a lot of our history today has been written by them. The history of us in the past was written by Muslims that come to the But the history of the last 200, 300, 400 years has been written by Orientalists. So we have to understand where they are coming from. So it's easy for us to counter to respond to their allegations against us. So the first is that this is the reflection. Okay, so I will start over again. The first is reflection. Reflection is very important because whenever we think about history, history is not something that simply happened in the past and has gone. When you drive your car and you see a car accident or someone fallen off a motorcycle, you don't simply see an accident. This stays with you for 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. You reflect. Why did this happen for? How could we have changed this? So this is the first thing. Humans are very good at reflecting, understanding. Number 2 is we learn. Humans are very good at learning, like I mentioned, from their mistakes. Every nation we build this big building. This building that was built was not built overnight. This building is one type. From the many types of buildings humans have built over hundreds of years. They learn from each other. When you have Suzuki car, when you have BMW, when you have any vehicle, vehicles have been learning from the past vehicles that have been made. There is no difference if me and you study history, or we study architecture, or we study medicine. Every science that we have is learning history. Number three, we have to understand change. Change is very important. Why? And I don't know why history and change come hand in hand. There's a very good book called Habits and Change by a Western historian. His name is Arnold Toynbee. Arnold Toynbee, he's written a book called Habits and Change. This is a very good book if someone wants to understand how humans have changed over hundreds of years or maybe millennia in how they build their society, how they build their infrastructure, governance, even religions out there. So we have to understand change is crucial if we want to understand success. Let me give you one example. Okay. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters. So we are 6 siblings. How many siblings do you have, brother? 4. And how many siblings do you have? 3. Okay. Now, if we go up, why is it that my grandmother had 12 children on one side and the other grandmother, she had 10 on the other side? Why is this big change at first? The number of children is decreasing, isn't it? It's because changes in society, changes in how we live are affecting the way we make decisions that are handled. More people now in Karachi are now learning English. More people are getting office jobs. More people are going on holidays now. Why is this? If you go 100 years ago, maybe in Karachi, if there was any population here, they will not be doing these things. But why is this happening? We have to understand the factors that are causing change. Change is in everything. I studied in madrasa. Maybe you have heard of this madrasa, Jamiatul Ulum Islamiyya, Banori. I studied 9 years. The studies that were there 9 years, if you went back 50 years, the studies would have been slightly different. And if we went back 50 more years, different. So we have to understand, if we don't understand what is affecting our society today, 50 years time, we will be too behind. This is the sad reality. Look at the West. Look at how economic, look at their governance, look at their military, look at their education system, look at the way they do things. They may be morally corrupt, but they understood the concept of history and change. So if we look at our Muslims today, how many books have been written by our Muslims today on history? And you weigh this with how many history books have been written by academics in Europe and America, there is a big difference. And finally, divine guidance. What do I mean by history is related to divine guidance? Does anybody know? Yes. So, and what is an example in the Quran of very strange? Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. Why does Allah tell us so much about Bani Israel in the Quran? We are not Bani Israel. Our prophet is not Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, but Allah keeps on telling us. As our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, لَتَتَّبِعُونَ سُنَنَ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ. You people will follow in the footsteps of those who came before. Why? Because human nature is repetitive. Human nature repeats itself. How many times do we say to people, when you ride on a motorbike, put your helmet on? They listen. Human nature is the best. So if we learn the mistakes that were made by Bani Israel, inshallah, those mistakes will not be made, inshallah. Anyone have any questions related to this? No? Okay. Now, The Quranic commandment reflects on history. This is very important. How many people here read the Quran? Okay. How many of us use the Quran to think? That's a big question. Many Muslims, unfortunately, only read the Arabic of the Quran. Alif, Ba, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. But for the rest of their life, they will have no idea what Surah Baqarah is talking about. It's very sad. So we have to understand reflection. أفلا يتدبرون القرآن? Don't these people what to think about what's in the Quran? It's very powerful. So Allah in the Quran time and time again gives us divine instruction. You can read this yourself. Allah gives us divine instruction in the Quran. Why don't they read the Quran? Why don't they think about the Quran? Why is reading so important? The first ayah of the Quran, the first ayah of the Quran is speechless. Iqra. Why Iqra? Why not Aqim Salat? Why not jihad? Why not zakat? Because the core of society, the center of Karachi, is based on education. The right education. This is very important. I will give you the name of a book. Islam between East and West. Islam between. This is written by Ali Izzat Berich. Ali Izzat Berich. He was the former prime minister, the president of Mosul. He was a Tarasser. He's a very strong Muslim, mashallah. This book, I recommend every Muslim to read this book. So he writes this. He says, if you live in the West and you become a doctor, you will never hear your lecturer tell you to become a good human being. You could be the biggest cardiologist, the biggest engineer. Never will you hear from your lecturers, he's a good human. So this shows us the education system is not simply Iqra. What is it? Iqra bismi rabbik. Read in the name of your Rabb. You have to have rububiyyat with ta'lim. You have to have education with connection with Allah. Historical examples. There are many historical examples in the Quran. I will not go through them. This is something for you to think about. We mentioned some of them. Story of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, story of Ad, Samud, Shu'aib alayhi salam. There are many stories in the Quran that we can reflect on. But the point is very important, is that Muslims, if you look at the Quran, how much of the Quran is stories? Does anyone know? How much percentage of the Quran is stories? 70%. Maybe 70%. Subhanallah. Imagine, the divine book is not just instructions. Do this, do not do this, do not. Allah gives us stories because humans can reflect on stories. Humans can think different angles. Maybe I stand here, I tell you a story. And maybe this brother, he understands something, but this brother does not understand. And this brother understands something, and this different people have different ways of extracting information. Now, next. Before we actually go on, I would like to ask you a question. Maybe you can write the answer. What is the significance of having a government that is led by divine guidance, by Allah's teachings? Quickly write down. What do you think is the important significance of why we need to have a government that is led by Islamic guidance? Why is it important? Yeah, if this is how many questions you have, also ask. Sure. Okay. Now, any ideas? It's very on for the justice. Okay, very good. That's good. Justice. Accountability. Very sure. System like or Google Ibad is for health. Very anything else? Alive is everything. I think personally, I think we all know why Islam is important, but we don't know how it is important. Difference. Many Muslims, you ask a Muslim on the streets, you say, do you think we need to have Islamic government? They will say, of course, yes. Ask them why. They will know. We need to understand the why. Why is it very important? We have to understand governance. Why is governance? There was a very important figure. His name was Muhammad Asad. He was a Jew. He was Jewish, and then he became Muslim. He even had, so he was not Austrian, but he had Pakistani passport. So Muhammad Asad, he has written a book called Islam at the crossroads. Islam at the crossroads. So he wrote this book because he wants to show the Muslims today were living a very successful life all the way until Western society rose. Now they came at a crossroad. Yes, make a choice now. Do you follow the West or do you establish your own system? This is a very important book. He also has another book on Islamic governance. He wrote this book when Pakistan was being designed. So when Pakistan was being designed, they asked him to write policy. So he wrote a whole book on policy for the Pakistan government. This book is also available as well. Both of these books are in English. So we have at the moment, historically, two major systems for governance. One is what we call a purely spiritual system. We will look at some examples in the past history, and we have purely material systems. If you take the pure, rich spiritual systems, these systems of governance will give you purpose, will give you spiritual fulfillment. You feel inside, alhamdulillah. But it will not give you development. You will not be able to develop this. For example, I'll give you an example. Let's say, for instance, someone has not been practicing Islam. Now, all of a sudden, they listen to Maulana Tariq Jameel, or I don't know, Maulana, and they now want to start practicing. So they go home and they break the TV and they get rid of all these things. Very good. But how will they structure the system at home for the next 10, 15, 20 years? They have no plan. The problem with the pure spiritual system is there is no structure long term as it develops. It is very good for the now, but for the future, problem. The pure material system has a very good structure, but it has no spirit inside. It has no values. Look, I'll give you one example. Look at the atom bomb. Atom bomb, you all know the atom bomb. The atom bomb is an amazing invention, but the problem is it was used to kill 2 million people in Japan. So this shows people with no spirit inside can destroy the whole world and feel nothing inside of themselves that this thing is a wrong act. Because they are focusing purely on material gain, like numbers. They look at the spreadsheets. This year, how much numbers do we have? This year, how much have we developed? So we need a system which we call the Islamic governance. Islamic governance brings both together. You have spiritual and you have material. And a very beautiful example of this would be the example of the Khulafa Rashidun. They brought together spiritual and they brought together the material as well. Subhanallah. How many years was the Khilafah al-Rashida? 30 years. But what they developed in 30 years, the Arabs never imagined for hundreds of years. Do you know what was the first book the Arabs wrote? Do you know? What was the first full book? The Quran. The first book that they wrote. Of course, Quran is Allah's Kalam. And the first one they wrote was Quran. No society had written their own book in such a short time. That's why when we reflect on Islam, you have to understand Islamic governance is very important if we want. I will mention one side note. Sometimes when we look around the world and we see someone with an Islam flag, we automatically think that these are the best people. It may not be true. Everyone has to be tested with Quran and with Sunnah. Allah's words and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, this is our guide. Maybe we have a country today like Daesh. Daesh, they come and they say we want to establish our government. But what structure do they have? Maybe they come with a very partial view. Like imagine I have a book and I only take 5 pages from this book and I say I want to run my government on these 5 pages. Is this going to be Russian? Of course not. You have to have the whole book of the Quran, the whole system of Rasulullah. So this is why it's very important. Okay. Now, for a functioning Islamic state, we need to have 5 things existing. Now, you can also use this at home as well. In your own house, I say you need to have these 5 things if you want your community to be successful. Yes? Okay, so first of all, you must have legal coherence. Meaning, we need to have laws that everyone follows. It can't be if you are related to this major or colonel, your law is different. And if you are related to this road cleaner, your law is different. You can't have this. You have to have legal coherence. Everyone, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one day a woman, her name was Fatima, came and she stole. And they said to Sayyidina Usama radiallahu anh, please can you speak to Rasulullah? He loves you a lot. And tell him to drop the case. As he came and he said to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, these people are asking me to drop the case for Fatima. Rasulullah's face went red, became very angry, and he said, by Allah, wallahi, if my own daughter Fatima did the same crime, nothing would stop me from taking off her hair. This was legal coherence. You have to have legal coherence in your family, in your community. So, number 2, economic equity. Economy has to be equal for everyone. You can't have rich people becoming rich and poor people suffering. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave everyone opportunity. Everyone has the same opportunity. Of course, the rizq from Allah is different. Maybe Allah gives me different rizq. Maybe Allah gives brother Zaman different rizq. Maybe he gives Maulana different rizq. Rizq is in the hands of Allah. But we need to have a system in place. I'll give you an example. Have you heard of Abdul Rahman ibn Auf? Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, he became very famous in Medina. Do you know why? Business. It was a very intelligent business. Because he had love of Iman in his heart and love of Allah, Allah put barakah in his. People used to come and they used to give him money. Please can you take care of my money as an amana, as a trust. So Sayyidina Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, he said, listen, I will take this money, I will invest this money for you. You don't do any work, you are silent partner. I will invest the money, and all you have to do is take the profit. So many people became wealthy because of the Rahman in their own radiallahu ta'ala was understanding and love for Allah. So this is economic equity. Number three, crisis management. Every government, every family, every home. Imagine if your child falls down and cuts themselves. What do? You have first aid box. You go to the doctor. You put plaster on them. This is crisis management. Every government needs to have crisis management. How do we deal with the problems? There's floods now in South. How does the government deal with this? By sanctions. Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he sees a lady and she's heating the water. She's putting grass and leaves inside the water because she has no money. And the children crying. And then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu, he goes himself and he brings food. And he cooks the food and he gives it to the children. Why? Crisis management. We need to learn. Very important. Does anyone know here what the definition of a leader is according to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Anyone know? It's a very famous hadith. Maybe you might know this hadith. What is the definition of a leader? Sayyid al-Qawm. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Sayyid al-Qawm Khalil. It's a Khalil. Leadership is not something you should want. Leadership is a burden. This is a big responsibility from the community, from Allah. Like the father at home. Does the father at home think he's a leader? No. The father at home, he sees himself as a khadim. Father, he goes to work, he comes back, he buys the food, he buys clothes. Why? Not because he thinks I'm a leader. He thinks I'm a khadim. I'm serving my family. This is what we need to have. Leadership. Number 4, foreign policy.
कोई गाड़ी है बाहर 585 वो गलत पार्क हुई इसको देख लीजिएगा प्लीज.
Does anyone have any questions? We've raised inshallah. Yes. Right. This question, the brother for the second assistance was asking what is the difference from an Islamic point of view of the capital system and communist system. Inshallah, later on, Islam will come where I will mention this point. Yes. If I forget, inshallah, remind me, inshallah, I will go with this, inshallah. Sometimes when I was actually researching for this, it was very interesting of sometimes we think for ourselves, Muslims, they're very backwards. Because the West, they have all of these terminologies. But we don't have these terminologies. The reality is the people of the past had the substance. Even if they did not have a name for it, they had the substance. The terminology doesn't make a difference. West is very good at giving things names. They're very good, but it doesn't mean that giving something a name makes you better than people who did not have a name for it. It just means that this is the way we have to try and understand different societies. Like, for example, today we have the word president. In the past, you did not have the name president. You had a different name. In today's time, we have entrepreneur. In the past, you had something, but the term entrepreneur was not used. Maybe you had a different term. I think it's very important for Muslims to become confident Muslims. We need to start learning the terms for these things. Because like they say, you name it, you tame it. Once you give something a name, like you have some mental disorder, in the past, maybe people used to call all mental disorders mental disorder. But now you have Alzheimer's, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have been given specific names. This does not mean Muslims in the past were backwards. It just meant, from scientific point of view, they had not developed as much as we have developed. This is the difference. And again, if you want to read more about this, Islam between the East and West has a whole chapter on civilization and culture. Very interesting. Civilization is different from culture. Okay, let's start with this. Next, foreign policy. So, what does foreign policy mean? Foreign policy means how does a Muslim government deal with other countries? How do you import next? If there is a war, how do you deal with this war? Like, for example, imagine you have your family, and the next door neighbor, maybe they have a dog in their garden, and this dog is barking. Oh, 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 oh. Okay, how do you deal with this? What is your foreign policy with dealing with this problem? So Muslims have to have foreign policy. Did you know, historically, Muslims were the first people to write books on foreign policy before Europe. And do you know the name of the scholar who actually was the first scholar to write a book on foreign policy? Does anyone know? No, before him. It was Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan Shayban. Imam Abu Hanifah. Even till today in the West, in university, they study. Where did he get his idea from? Where did he get foreign policy from? He got foreign policy from Qur'an, from Rasulullah. So we have to understand it. And finally, pluralism. Pluralism means we have to give the rights to every community. Look at Medina. In Medina, you had Muslims living there, you had Christians living there, you had Yahud living there, some Mushriks were living there. Rasulullah, he gives everyone their rights. Because in the Quran, Allah tells us about the Jews and the Christians. Even a Muslim man is allowed to marry a Christian woman or a Jewish woman. Right? Because we have to be able to live in the same covenant. Anyway, it's a very long topic, but just keep this in mind. Well, if you can explain this. Yes. As in government as positions. No. This was just the animation made very easy. Sorry? It seems that pluralism is the most important Yeah, I mean, maybe this is my error. I apologize. Yeah. Yeah, so the book is called, there's two books that he wrote. One is called Sir al-Kabir, and one is called Sir al-Saghir. The two books. If you actually Google this, Muhammad bin Hassan Shaybani, foreign policy, you will find lots of information about it. Okay, should we move on? Now, what is the criteria for social success? So these are 4 points that I have. Some of them I have already mentioned. So ethical governance. There has to be governance, but your governance has to be based on some sort of ethics. Like if you have a family and your son does not want to go to university or college, or he doesn't want to marry a particular girl that you can't find, there must be some ethical governance on how you deal with this. You can't just hit him and force him. You can't just leave him. There has to be some way that we can both maybe come to some middle ground. So you have to have ethical governance. Ethical governance also deals with crimes. How does the judge imprison someone? How does he decide whether this person is guilty, whether this person is innocent? All of these things, the huquq al-ibad, comes under ethical governance. Now today, we might look at America, or we might look at UK, and we might think, these people have very good governance. No, they don't have ethical governance. They have governance, but this governance is secular governance. There's a difference between secular governance and ethical governance. Adaptability. Remember when I told you about families having lots of children and then this number slowly shrinking over the years? Why? Because families are now adapting. Today's family is adapting. In the past, maybe getting married was very easy. Yes. Today it's very hard. Trying to find the right girl and trying to. Why is this for? Because our societies are not adapted. The speed of change. Social media has caused lots of new challenges for us. We have to understand. So adaptability, science is a big issue. In today's times, everyone know about AI? If Pakistan does not invest in AI, do you think Pakistan will be able to compete with many of the world countries? Of course not. We have to have the science. We have to have doctor medicine. We have to have all of this. All of this, if you look in the past, the Muslim governments, and I'll give you many examples, were at the head of science. Al-Khawarizmi, Ibn Sina, many others, they were at the head. Economic development, we can't just say, I'm going to have a house and I'm going to run my house on Islam. Okay, give me an example. How are you going to run your house on Islam? Give me 5 examples. We don't know. We just want Islam, but we don't know how this Islam is going to give us success. Economic development of Pakistan, how is it going to happen? You have to bring people together. You have to bring people who know the Quran and Sunnah together. You have to bring people who know secular science together, and we can work with data from society. Economic development is very important. And I think example, like Afghanistan. You look at Afghanistan today. Afghanistan, I went there maybe 4 or 5 months ago. Very poor, very, very unstable economically. But slowly now they are becoming strong. They do not know how to develop their country. So Turkey and China have to come to Afghanistan to give them ideas on how to develop themselves. Did you know this? Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, he brought mathematicians from Constantinople teach the people of Medina mathematics. Can you imagine Sayyidina Umar already? He knew if my Muslims of Medina do not know mathematics, we will have problems in the future. And stability and social harmony. This is to do with policing. Having a good judicial system, government, judge, police force, army, who have fear of Allah in their hearts. This is very important. Okay, let's move on to it. Now, okay, before we actually go to this slide, I want to ask you a question. Whenever a new ideology comes into a country, we don't see this ideology in front of us. Like I'll give you an example. Imagine, for example, Pakistan. So Pakistan, before Pakistan, we had India. India was governing the whole, and then Pakistan was split. Now, let's say, for example, one president comes, or one prime minister comes, another prime minister comes. MashaAllah, Pakistan is very good, changing prime minister. Why don't we see this in society? Why don't I see on child person? Why don't I see it in defense? Why don't I see it in Why? This is a question we need to ask. There are always changes taking place in Pakistan. New laws are always coming. New ideologies are coming. Sometimes maybe Pakistan is influenced by another country. Maybe. This is normal. So these are some ways I found why we don't see change in society. So number one, normalization. Normalization is like, have you heard about the frog experiment? You know, frog experiment. They took a frog and they put the frog inside of a pot of water and they put this pot on top of the cooker stove. And then they lit the fire. And as the water was getting hot, the frog was staying in the water until the water became so hot it killed the frog. We are like this. We live in a society. We become normal. The problems. You see on the street someone take a gun, take someone's mobile phone. We become normal to this. We see someone taking rishwat. We become normal to this. We see someone doing something else, breaking someone's car. We become normal. Normalization is very problematic. Normalization, where you get to be careful. Number two, historical ignorance. When we do not know what the law was 10 years ago or 50 years ago, we won't understand what change has come today. I probably would say maybe 99% of the population of Pakistan does not know they are going through change. They have no idea. AI is bringing new change for them, new problems, new tests, lack of education. We need to educate people in society. If we take education away, if we don't tell them the problems, these people will fall into the problems in the next 10, 15, 20 years. Media influence, we all know this. Did you know this? The films that are made in Hollywood films, they have to go through CIA first of all. CIA has to vet the films because they only want that version of America to be seen by the public. What's the name for this word? Propaganda. So when you have this media influence, this is very problematic. In the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you had shu'ara, the poets. These were the media, and these would influence people. This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he had poets, Asad bin Sabit radiallahu anhu, to counter the influence. We need to have media presence. If people who have concern with Pakistan do not have media presence, like YouTube channels, like movies or dramas that have strong ideas, strong values presented to the people, tomorrow we will suffer. Because we will be the dominated. And Ibn Khaldun, he said, the dominated will always follow the dominator. This is the law of man. The one who is dominated, why today? Think about this. Think about this. Why today do we in this society have 3 meals in one day? Where? You know where 3 meals came from? Where did 3 meals come from? There was a man called Ziyad in Baghdad. Ziyad was in the time of Abbasi Khilaf. And he designed 3 meals. Arabs did not have 3 meals. They only ate in the morning and they ate in the evening. Ziyad, he came with 3 meals. And he came with different types of clothes for summer, different types of clothes for winter, and this kind of mentality slowly spread in the country. So we have to be very careful of what we watch on TikTok, what we watch. Some of these have an influence on us, effect. And it makes us not grateful for us. Allah says, ungrateful brothers of Allah, unfortunately, has affected millions. And finally, individualization. What does this mean? Muslims are not individual. We are ummah. Ummah means like my family. If I get a phone call saying my brother was in a car accident, do you think I can continue this presentation? Why? 100%, because I believe him to be part of me. This is called ummah. Individualization means if someone else is hurt, I say, okay, let me drive my car. It does not concern me. So we have to understand this is what's happening today. These are some of the reasons. Has anyone ever heard of famous Ibn Khaldun? Ibn Khaldun was a North African famous historian. He was a qadi, he was a judge. He wrote a book called Tarikh Ibn Khaldun, 8 volumes. The first volume of this book is called Muqaddimah. Now, this book is a bit boring. Not everyone is going to enjoy reading this, but he has some very good insights that even today Western universities use his ideas. They build on his ideas because he developed the science known as sociology. Sociology is a science to understand societal development. What is happening in the world today? Why is it that people that come from mountain village areas, most of them take the labor jobs? And why is it that people living in Karachi for many, many years take jobs in offices? This is also understanding the philosophy behind society. So he talks about this. He says every society goes through 4 cycles, 3 cycles, but the 4th is where change comes. So he says every society first of all starts off like Asabiya. You know Asabiya? Asabiya is like uh, being barbaric. Now, let me give you an example. You may have heard people say in the past, humans used to be hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherer is basically we had a family. The men will go out into the jungle. They will find the animal, bring back the animal, and then everyone eats the animal. Like people live in Amazon rainforest. This is called hunter-gatherer. This society is called the Asariya society. What does the Asariya society mean? They will fight for their own people. To protect their women and children, they will fight with other tribes. Yeah. It's called Asariya. Now, this is in our nature. If someone comes to fight my family, I will naturally want to defend them. The problem is that this is the call for nationalism. The call for nationalism is what? We have one country which is Muslim here, and we have one country which is Muslim here. Both of them believe in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. But we will simply our best and then if they ever do something, we are ready to fight them. Where did this come from? Hunter-gatherer. So societies in the beginning, they start off in the early formation. They start off fighting barbaric society, like animals fighting. And then slowly this starts to become strong. They move away. And then they start to become what we call civilized. We call them, they have now become culturally civilized. And then slowly decline comes because now they are no longer protecting their families. They are no longer protecting their values anymore. So foreigners can come and easily destroy them. And you see this cycle. And then the cycle starts again. This is what happens. We call this a cyclic historical analysis. It starts on formation, peak. This happened in our family. What's it? When you first get married, partial. Protect your wife, protect your house, everything. Then after a while, when the family becomes strong, you don't care what happens. Unfortunately, this type of mentality happens in families. And people that have big problems in their families because they don't understand families are not static. They go through change. If we don't fix those changes or control them, we will also go through this. But I'm going to show you lots of examples of this. So do not worry at the moment. What I will say, however, is Ibn Khaldun was not the first person to talk about this philosophy. Before him, famous Greek philosopher Polybius. Polybius, he actually talked about cyclic change. He had a different understanding. Ibn Khaldun, some even say the Mayans in America, they also had cyclic system as well. And there's also a famous rising professor today, Ray Dalio, if you have never heard of him. He also talks about economy. The people who are into, they want to become entrepreneurs, or they want to become very wealthy, they will look at the cycles of business. How does Apple company start off their hands? Then what happens? It becomes the peak. And Apple will fall. Another company will come and overtake Apple. Another company will take Microsoft. This happens. If we don't stay ahead of the curve, we are the ones that we suffer. So as a government, we need to understand this is going to happen. At this time, how many years? 78 years? According to Ibn Khaldun, Pakistan is here. romanticized. Because he says this change happens every 30 to 40 years. Every 30 years, 30 years, 30 years. What if you get a Pakistan will soon, unfortunately, have to go through change? This is the Sunnah of Allah. Sunnah of Allah التي خلت من قبل it came before. Now, this is also happened in the time of the Khulafa Rashidun. They only lasted for 30 years. Banu Umayyah, they lasted for 90 years. Banu Abbas, cycle. Now, these are warning signs now of civilization decline. Yeah, warning signs for civilization decline. Okay? Growing dependence on others. I just want you to think, at the moment, Pakistan, to think, what is happening? Is Pakistan growing dependence on others? The more you depend on others, then the slower your development will happen. Like a business. Every business that depends on others is not so. Excessive luxury and consumerism. Are we seeing excessive luxury? Slowly it's starting to come inside us. Political and social division. Is there difference now between the politics and between society? It seems. Intellectual and moral laziness. Unfortunately, where are most of our intelligent people going? They're going abroad. Better life, stability. We want to bring them more here so we can have strong governance. Abandonment of religious pursuits. These are 5 warning signs. This is mentioned by Ali Izzat-Begovic. Ali Izzat-Begovic, he mentions about the decline of society. He says, the UK, same thing in the UK. I live in the UK, and one day I can tell you these 5 things are there. In America, it's happening. It's just a matter of they're trying to fix some of these problems. Okay, next. Yeah. Maybe. I think this is more idealistic of how this model works. Some may not go through the whole cycle. Some of their peaks might be what we call a decline in the society. That's all right. So now this is from Ali Izzat-Begovic's book, Islam Between East and the West. He has written a very long chapter on this. We don't have time to go through this, but these are some of the points. Now, unfortunately, many of us might see in society people who attack Islam. They say Islam is backwards. Very common people say this. Or they might say Islam does not have the solution for all of our problems. It had solutions 1,400 years ago, but not then. Or they might say Islam is changing. Why do people say these things? The reason is because he says they do not differentiate between civilization and culture. What is civilization? Civilization is the ability for human beings to develop sciences, societies, to advance. This does not require religion. You don't need Quran to tell you to build a car. You don't need Quran to tell you to build a house. Even though the Quran tells us Allah, He brings the clouds, and then the clouds bring the water. But we do not need the Quran to tell us this. Allah did not send the Quran as a science book. This is very important. So, how did human beings develop the atom bomb? Civilization developed. How did the Egyptians build the pyramids? Civilization. It's all civilization. So if civilization makes an atom bomb, who do we blame? Do we blame religion? No. If they throw the bomb on people, do we say civilization? No. Culture is the product. Culture is where we develop inside of ourselves the whole environment. This is what culture is. So, what is the definition of civilization? Mastery over nature through science and tools. Some people say, no, I don't like this word when people say, why are you studying? Oh, I'm studying non-Islamic science. What is non-Islamic science? Is atom non-Islamic science? Is rate non-Islamic science? Is economy non? Everything is. Everything, if you do it with the right intention, will bring you close to normal. Non-Islamic is actually one. Yeah, if we see is non-Islamic. Arrogance is non-Islamic. The culture, human development through values and ethics, spiritual refinement. This is what culture is. Christian culture, Hindu culture, BJP culture, Zionist culture, this culture, Daesh culture, the Tablighi culture, the Tasawwuf culture. These are all few cultures we have. If you don't understand culture, you will not understand differentiation in Russia. You always think I am better than anyone else. Why am I better? I am better if Allah is happy. This is the answer. If Allah is happy with my culture, what is the culture here? We sit down like this. The teacher stands here. We have a smart screen. We have a camera. This is the culture. Is this culture okay with Islam? Is Islam okay with this culture? You have to look in the Quran and Sunnah. If it's not, then we say this culture is toxic. This is not good for our spiritual development. What is the purpose of civilization? Utility, production, control, survival. Untethered. Culture. What is culture? Meaning, identity, self-awareness, transcendence. Very interesting point. Ali is a Benedict. He says this. Animals will not have culture. Animals only have limited civilizations. That's why if you look at dog today, and you look at a dog 3,000 years ago, its lifestyle is the same. Maybe now its food is different. And in the past, its food is different. But this is why we have to understand. Humans are unique in developing a culture. People have online culture. Maybe one guy, he meets a girl online. Yes, Islam maybe. But he develops a culture. So we have to understand culture is very either good for us or bad for us. And a very interesting point, no human being, this is a very good set. No human being is neutral in morals. No human being, except for the prophets. No human being is neutral in their morals, except the prophets. The prophets were always either neutral or positive. So we have to understand, just because I'm standing here with mashallah, beard, a goatee on my head, and I have this clothes, doesn't mean I am better than you. You have to understand what are my moral thinking habits. What's my lifestyle here? So we have to know why am I saying this? Because sometimes we think, mashallah, Harun Rashid, Allah, this guy is such a good guy. Maybe he was good, maybe he was bad. Only Allah knows. Just because he was in that position doesn't make him good. Sometimes we look at Taliban, we think, Taliban, mashallah, with Imam, take the Imam off, take the beard away. Do they have the roles? We have to test it with Quran and Sunnah. Maybe they'll make some decisions about girls' education. Maybe we say some people agree, some people disagree. They are not neutral. Either they are going towards good or sometimes going towards bad. You have to test everyone. This is why Imam Malik Rahimullah said, every human being statement will be taken or rejected except for Rasulullah. Everyone. This is why we learn this. Progress time. How can we test civilization and progress? Technical progress, external quantitative progress. Like a business. You ask the accountant, what's the figures? Give me the data. How can you tell cultural progress, moral, internal quality? We need to have both. Effect on needs, expands needs endlessly. Civilization will never stop. Today they want to go to the moon and build, I don't know, nuclear power station on the moon. Tomorrow they want to go to Mars. Then where do they want to go? It is not making life better for us. It is just the natural development of society. Limits needed. We have to have limits culturally. If I build an atom bomb, I need to know where not to use this. If I build Karachi, I need to know where not to use this. If I build a car, I need to have a speed, maximum speed. View of nature. Civilization will always exploit and destroy nature. Civilization, if you look at what is happening now with cobalt, cobalt, lithium, all of these, they are trying to take it back because they want to develop their business. They want more numbers, quantity. We have to live in harmony with nature. All of these points are got from where? Islam between East and West. Any question on this? Yes. Now, I want to go through the major civilizations that existed in the time of before Islam. Because why? There's a very good book. It's called, it's originally written in Arabic by Maulana Abu Hassan Ali Nadib. Maybe you have heard of this individual on an Alibiya Republic. He wrote a book called ماذا خسر العالم بإفراط المسلمين. What did the world suffer because of the decline of us? Very powerful name. Very strong place. Next, every Muslim I think should read it. It's translated to English. It's called Islam and the World. And in Urdu translated as well. I don't know what the name of the book is.
मुसलमानों के उरूज व ज़वाल की दुनिया पर असरात.
Now, this book, he talks of this book. I have read this book maybe 5 times. Very good book. Every time I learn something new from this. He talks about society before Islam. Yes, we need to understand what did Islam bring to the world. What did Islam bring to the world? It's the question we and you need to ask ourselves. What did Islam bring to the world? I'll let you answer this question. What did Islam bring to the world? Some of those writings, excellent system of governance based on spiritual, moral development. Anything else? Right models. Right models. Anything else? Muslim and gender. Very good. First one, Muslim and gender. I think the reason why you guys are giving one answer, it is like you have a screen and you are giving one pixel answer. You are not looking at the big picture. And we can't see the big picture unless we see everything else. When you see darkness, you understand what light is. When you see poverty, you understand what richness is. So we have to see the opposite. So there were several civilizations that I will talk about. Number one, the Persian civilization. This was the epitome, the perfect example of extravagance. Now, Mullah Arabia, he writes about this a lot of detail because there is lots of information available to us about the Persians. Some of these Persian rulers, they would spend in today's terms billions of dollars on one feast, one banquet. They had carpets, which was approximately maybe 30 acres long, 30 acres with pearls stitched into it to make it look like artificial grass. This is how much they spent. And religious deviation, because remember, if you do not have belief in Allah, then you make your own morals. You are the king of morals. So today, if you want someone to do some work for you, you can tell them to do it. If you want to kill someone, you can tell them. If you want to abuse them, you are the power. So these people originally started off as Zoroastrian and Majus, fire worship. And originally, Zoroastrian religion was a good religion. Some say this maybe a Nabi of Allah came to Persia and he fought Islam. Allah knows better. But eventually, the rulers viewed themselves as semi-divine. They used to think only my family has the right to rule over Persia. I have God's DNA inside of me. This is what they used to believe. So eventually, what these people used to do? So eventually, what did these people used to do? These people eventually, everyone had to give tax to the government. Where did the tax go? Mashallah. Into the bottoms. It did not go to develop the country. So the gap between the rich and the poor became bigger and bigger. They say, in today's days, what is the symbol of richness today? Is car crash? House? Yeah. Maybe house, maybe car. Maybe it's in this time. In their days, it was in clothes and it was in the topi you had on your head. The richest person used to have a topi hat that was worth 100,000 gold coins. That's what the sign he was of a high. And then the person who was below him, 50,000. Then below him, 10,000. Like this. United States, like people have Rolex watch, people have Land Cruiser. Like this. This was identity. So you can imagine how frustrated the people were. But interestingly, what Abu Hassan Ali says, the people felt they had to copy rich. Like today, if you can't afford Rolex watch, you buy, take Rolex watch. Just to show people, you can't afford iPhone, you buy, take iPhone. This is the psychology. Social and political consequences. Now, because if you do not have a system from Allah, where are you going to get your system from? From man. And man is always biased towards morality, either positive or negative. So you will make your laws either in favor of yourself or you make your laws which are balanced. Unfortunately, these people chose the wrong laws. The laws were in favor of the rich. The rich get all their benefits. The rich get away with crime. You could kill someone, and because your family is related to the royal family, nothing happens. Now, if you are living in this society, is there any way out for you? Where do you go? This, remember, Persia was superpower of the world. Where do you go? Your color is different. Your caste is different. If you go to Europe, people will single you out. You stop. People have lost hope. Khosrow II, 800 million pounds of gold he had amassed. Imagine this. Now you understand this day, sir. Think about it. 800 million pounds. 1 pound is 4.2 grams. How much is that? In today's time, if someone said they are worth $1 billion, it doesn't mean they have $1 billion. It means they have investments, which is okay. This man in his account, in his house, he has 800 million. He every day goes and looks at it. Maybe smells this. What does he do with this? Shows the supreme. Yesterday, the third. Now, this was in a time of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu sent the army there, he ran away. He took with him singers, up to 300 singers. Well, he took over 100 cooks. He took as many of the riches he could to run away. Imagine this. This was his purpose was not Sayyid al-Qawm Khadim. He was not the Khadim of his qawm. He was the Sayyid of his nafs. It's the difference. Besides. Tiva. You see, when Islam comes, Islam is going to be very attractive. Makes sense. Greece. Everyone heard of Greece? Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, very famous intellectuals. The problem with Greece was the total opposite. Religious and moral problems. Again, Greece did not base its laws upon wahi, upon divine revelation. They based it upon their intellect. And what is going to happen if you do this? What is going to happen is you are going to create man-made gods. So what happened in their times? They have lots of gods. Zeus was the highest god, just like Hindus have. They have the highest god, and then they have other gods, and then God of love, and God of anger, and God of war. So this destroyed the system. And subhanallah. I mean, this is something which is actually. You look at their gods. Their gods used to fornicate. Their gods, these are the stories. If you have gods who fight and get angry and arrogant, what is the state of the people going to be? Alhamdulillah, Allah is love. Allah is love. Allah is Kareem. Allah is Jabbar. What is the state of Allah's servants mentioned? Ajiba. I went in England, I went to a Hindu temple. They called us for fatwa. Ajib. Hindus called us for fatwa because they wanted to build a Muslim monument inside of their complex. So we went there and I saw the monument and I said, it's okay. It was basically moon with star. I said, so. So I said to the man, can you tell me about your religion? He said, yes. So we went to one building. He said, in this building, those Hindus who believe in God that has no image, no shape, no form, no image is allowed to go inside this building. He said, that's the mind set. Then he took us to another hall. And here the guy had 10 heads and arms. And he said, this is the one where we believe, this God is the one that destroys everything. Then we went for another one. It was an old man with a handkerchief roller high on his head, white beard, with a tasbih in his hand, sitting like this, and a big statue. And I said, who is this? He said, this is Saiba. My mom worships him. Muslim. My mom worships a Muslim Saiba. And I said, subhanAllah, this statue. So where do these people get their morals and laws from? Themselves. They make them up. They take their own desires and they project their desire. I had projected on the screen into their gods. Plato criticized views obsessed with liberty, entertainment, and sensual pleasure. The problem with this society was this society became a hedonistic society. A society which was all about how can you fulfill your desire in the best way. Like we see today on social media. The more you have views, the more social or desires are being fulfilled. This is the sad reality. The movies that are being made today are all about fulfilling what you want, not what is beneficial for society. And the consequence of all of this, you can read it. Anthropomorphism is when you give human shape to God. So the God has hair, the God fights, the God, yes, no, strange. Now, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this is Rome. Rome, you heard of Rome now. Rome was not a very nice place. The reason is because the history of Rome went through cycles. Greece went through cycles. Persia went through cycles. So the Roman, we have two eras of Rome. We have the old Rome, then we have the new Rome. Both Romes were problematic. What is the old Rome? The old Rome was borrowed from Greece. They had multiple gods. Very problematic. What is the new Rome? The new Rome is where there was a king called Constantine. Constantinople. You heard of Constantinople? This was before Islam, a few hundred years before Islam. He became Christian. Interesting point. Why did he become Christian? So Marana Alimiya, he says, he became Christian because Rome was declining. He would not find anything that would boost the morality of the society except by adopting Christianity. So what he does is he adopts Christianity. Now he becomes Roman leader, Christian. Does Christianity teach us how to run a country? No. So where does he get his laws from? Himself. So Rome was going through another formation, peak, and decline. So political corruption in Rome, respect was very big, unfortunately. Empires built on exploitation. So the way that the Romans worked was like this. Imagine, for example, we had this room here. This is the Roman government. Roman government meaning like today's situation. Then we take over this area over here. This becomes Rome as well, but this becomes second class. We take over this becomes Rome, second class. So we are the elite. And everyone else whose color and caste is different from us, we exploit, we tax them. And we bring all the taxes, just like the British government did with India. India was British, yes, but they were second class British. So they took from India, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, all these areas, and they made England richer. Kohinoor, diamond is still over there. Yeah, this is what they do. This is exactly, this is why, interesting point is this is why colonialism is simply the Roman structure. That's what it is. Colonialism is simply Rome with a new name. And this is what it is. Religious manipulation. What does religious manipulation mean? It means that whenever they wanted to bring a new law, they would change Christianity. You look at Christianity today. When I say Christianity, there are two forms of Christianity which are well established around the world. Catholicism, Catholics, and Protestants, evangelicals. Did you know this? In the UK, there was a king called King Henry VIII. He married his wife, and he got tired of his wife. The formation and peak and decline happened. But in Christianity, there is no such thing as talaq. There's no divorce. Can't divorce. So what does he do? He becomes the head of the church and he changes the law. See, he changes the religion because of his own desire. And now, right? Exactly. This is the sad reality. This is what they were doing. And the people on the ground can't do anything. Imagine you have a Maulana. And he said, okay, we will change the rules. And we will change this rule. The people who are listening to him can't do anything because they don't know what's in the Quran. They don't know what Rasulullah said. They just have to listen to this Maulana, and he speaks and he speaks and he changes this. And this is what was happening in this time. Religious manipulation. Constantinople is from Constantine. Today is Istanbul. Conversion literally most basic. The reason why he became Christian was not because he believed in Isa alayhi salam, because he wanted popularity. Just like unfortunately today, Some, Allah knows best. But sometimes I see social media and some people become Muslim only because to gain more followers. They might become Muslim, and make video with themselves. And then more Muslims want to follow. You have commercialization of faith. So these were, unfortunately, these people, religion to them was a money-making business. The other day I went to life science. So the man said to me, Yara, I went up the stairs and it was like, Allah was best. The Imam and a sword, and they said, this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't know, is there any belief for this? Anyone can put Imam or old Imam inside of the cabinet and say, this is from Sahaba's place. Oh. Eventually, when they finished, the man said, now you can put the money in here. But this is the reality. If religion is motivated by money, if business is the ultimate aim, why you're a Muslim, that means ikhlas is on. And this is what's happening, commercialization of this. Unfortunately, this is what was happening to the Christian church in Europe. Christian church in Europe had become fully monetized. This is what it was. The Pope was making money. The church was making money. So many bad things were happening. Suppression of knowledge. Finally, they did not allow people to learn too much. Because if you teach them too much, they ask too much questions. And if they ask too much questions, your job is in trouble. Alhamdulillah, Islam is not like this. In Islam, if a Maulana says something, you can ask the Maulana, what is your belief? And if his belief does not fit with Qur'an and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can say this to both. No Maulana has monopoly over religion. No one. So this is why these people were silenced. Did not say a word about religion. Only the person who was authority could talk about religion. So this is why we have to understand why Islam brought freedom. And even if you look today, when people in the West, they say freedom of speech, the reality is there is no freedom of speech. Because as soon as you say what you really want, you're in trouble. Your visa gets cancelled. You might lose your job. You speak about Zionism and finish. Your career is gone. How many non-Muslims today have spoken against what is happening in Gaza and they have lost their jobs, lost their reputation? Maybe they lose their reputation in this dunya, but maybe in the Akhirah Allah will give them a reputation based on this. So this is why Islam is very exciting. Our word area of not 100%. 100%. Unfortunately, I don't want to mention these things. There are many examples we all know where people feel as though whatever the Mulana says has to be true. Alhamdulillah, maybe it's worked in many places, but now we're living in a society where people are more educated. They want no answer. You can't just say to someone, this is jais, this is not jais. Someone might come to you and say to you, brother, cryptocurrency, is this jais or not? Explain to me more. Because there's so much information coming from different angles. If you don't give them the right answer, they might have shak in their religion. So we have to know, I was telling you about change. The Maulanas have to understand we're living in a society of change today. We need to understand the mindset of the Prophet. Maybe for some people, a simple answer will work. For some people, you might have to break down the nuance answer. And so, so basically, the brother asked a question. What is the connection between Rome in Italy and between Constantinople? So what happened was, this is a very interesting point. There is a professor in America called Professor Jonathan Lyons. You understand? Lines. He's written 2 books, very good books. One of the books is called Islam through the Eyes of the Western. Very good. This will give you confidence and understanding of why the West looks at Islam as it is. And he historically goes through Europe, classical Europe. What was the mindset of people? And he says a very interesting thing. He says, the one person who brought Europe together was Salahuddin. Why is this important? Because Europe has never been unified, historically, never ever. Europe, Spain, Spanish Christians hated Turkish Christians. Turkish Christians hated African Christians. African Christians hated Yemeni Christians. They all were different. This is not like difference between Sunni Shia. Sunni Shia, at least we understand Allah and His Rasul. They did not even have this concept. They considered themselves to be totally different. So the only time in history when all the Christians came together was Salahuddin. He brought them all together. Was this good for us and was this not good? Allah knows. So Christianity was split between West Europe. This is where you had what we call today Roman Catholic. Yeah. And we had the Eastern Christians, today known as Orthodox. Orthodox, they have beards, Russian, Greek Orthodox, all of them. They come under this. So in the Quran, when Allah says, Allah is not talking about Italy alone. Allah is talking about these Eastern European Rome, because they were the ones who were fighting with Persia. Persia was next to them. Okay. Everyone understanding this so far? The last bit of information, I do apologize. I'm trying to go through the past. Now, China. Very easy to understand China. China had no religious teachings. China was, you had these 3 religion styles. You have a religion yourselves, very spiritual. Remember, I told you about spiritual governance, material governance. So China had Lao, which is Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. Yeah? The problem what happened in China is this. So in China, this is what one of the says. He says in China, Buddhists were influenced by Hindu beliefs. Original Buddhists, their system was a very peaceful system. Later on, they became influenced by Indian, their beliefs. So they were introduced to shirk and all of that. And then they became problematic. Yeah, so if you heard of Brahman, yeah. So in India, there's 4 castes. Yeah, there's 4 castes. You have the Brahmins, who are the highest. No one can touch them. And then below them, you have 3 other classes that they will come later. Yeah. So these were again, China did not really have any strong governance. China was only good in developing, various different sciences, medicine. Okay, next slide. Okay, now India was interesting because India, they have the numbers in English we have today 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you know where these came from? In Europe, you had Latin numbers. If you want to say 1, if you want to say 2, 3, 4, then V, 1V, B, B1. Now, this was very difficult to do. Accountant would have to do lots and lots of. So the Europeans took it from the Arabs, the Arabic numbers. Where did the Arabic get their numbers from? Because Sahaba did not have numbers like this. They got it from India. So the original Arabic numbers are from India. We call them Indian numbers. So India had a very strong system. However, they were living in religious extremism because they had the 4 castes. Yeah, so you had the first caste was the Brahmins. And they believed this was like the head of their god. Then they have the soldiers, the warriors. Then they have the artisans. And then they had the Zamans, the ones right at the bottom. And their system was those at the bottom, they have been created to serve everyone else. You can only be the best Dalit if you serve. You are not allowed to drink from the same cup as anyone above you. You are not allowed to sit with them, can't marry with them. It was very caste-based system. Unfortunately, we as Muslims slowly have a little bit of caste system inside us. It's inside, but we have to realize and try to get rid of it. Oppression of women. This was very widespread in India. Maybe you know many examples of this, but the biggest example is the if someone found out that they had a baby girl, they would probably kill the baby. Yeah. So, and this is a sad reality even till today in some places in India. And fortunately, again, Muslims are slowly falling into this problem. And social exploitation. Yeah. Now, I don't want to go into this. You can read about this yourself. There's Wednesday, God's got up to Astaghfirullah. And Hindu gods kind of, subhanAllah, I went to the temple and they had images of Astaghfirullah. I don't want to mention, you can go and read about it yourself. Next inshallah. Now comes the time, Arab world. We looked at Vatican. We looked at Rome. We looked at India. We looked at China. We haven't looked at Africa because Africa wasn't really developed. So now we look at the Arabian Peninsula. They were very famous in eloquence. Do you know this? How many words are there in the English language? You know? How many words? 600,000. How many words are there in Spanish? 400,000. How many words are there in Arabic? 5 million. That's only the words we have documented. So Arabic eloquence, how they would explain things was phenomenal. That's why the Qur'an was revealed in the Arabic language. Memory and preservation, these people had fantastic memories because they live in the desert. They don't have anything else. Bravery and freedom, we hear about Arabs of the past being brave, soldiers, warriors, fighting because they were hunter-gatherers. When you are hunter-gatherer, you focus on strength. You focus on developing your fighting skills. And they were loyal and they were trustworthy. This is what Arabs were famous for. They would never cheat. They would never lie. This went against their culture. For the culture, Arab civilization may have been much less than Roman culture, but their culture was richer. They had a very strong culture. The only problem that they had was obviously shirk and certain social illnesses. You look at Shah. So, these were some of the things that they had. Acknowledgement of Allah. They did acknowledge Allah. They believed in some beings called Allah. Unfortunately, they distort the image of Allah. If someone comes to you as a Christian and says, "Oh, I also believe in Allah. Why do you say I am not on the true path?" What do you say? You say, yes, you believe in Allah, but your vision of Allah is different from the Islamic vision of Allah. You believe Allah has a son. It's not that. Worship of celestial bodies. They used to worship stars. They used to worship angels. And idols as intermediaries. They used to believe that idols were like secretary. You want to go to meet the boss? You can't meet the boss. You have to meet the secretary. You have to meet the manager. Once you become very, very, very high up, then you can meet the boss. So they had this system where you're not allowed to directly speak to Allah. You're too little. You have to speak to His right hand man. I see. This is what we do in society only. You can't meet presidents. Who are you to meet the presidents? You can meet the president's representative in Karachi. Maybe you can't even meet him. You can maybe send an email to his next door neighbor. Yeah. So this is what Abu Raja al-Qadhi said. We worship stones. If we found a better one, we would switch. So today we worship this, and tomorrow we find a different stone better than this one, we start worshiping this one. Irrational. Does it make sense? Well, you're gonna have to do it. Oh. Now, this is an overview. You can take a picture maybe of this. So this is a rough overview of the civilization, the core beliefs, the problems, and the reason for the collapse. So know the cycle. So when we think of Rome, we don't think of Rome as one linear governance. It was cycles, called Rome, but different cycles they're going through. Similarly, Greece, China, India, all of these were problems that we can see. Yeah. So this, I'm collecting this information from two books. Two ways. One is the Islam works, and the second is a book called The Lost History, Lost Islamic History. These are two books I got from. However, this is well documented. So in those books, you'll find references to other works. There's a lot of referencing from Oriental works. So a lot of this is from Oriental works themselves. So Egyptians, the problem was that they didn't have much information about the Egyptian civilizations. They didn't really, I don't think they had much information. We're talking about Orientalists. So Egyptian civilization was only discovered maybe 200 years ago. And it's only recently that they. But this was the people had documented themselves. So we have, next slide, please. I didn't have information shown. Yeah. Now, I made this graph. And again, I apologize, it's not accurate, but this is just to give you an understanding. So, the key transformations brought by Islam. When it comes to God-centered worldview, all other religions were not God-centered. Islam is the only religion that is God-centered. Either it was revolving around the king, or it was revolving around the family, or it was revolving around wealth. This is how, like today, if I ask you today, what is, maybe I can say this, but maybe, what is Pakistan revolving around? Question would you think about? What is UK government revolving around? What is Saudi government revolving around? Yes. Maybe it's partially cultural, maybe it's something else, mercy and accountability. Other countries around the world, accountability and mercy were next to nothing. Islam came with accountability. That's what. Practical religion. Every other religion is very difficult to act upon. I'll give you an example. Now, you see, this is why I think people do not understand Islam properly, and they have taken ideas from other religions. In your head, when you think of someone who has a lot of taqwa, what does he look like? Be honest. In your head, someone who is very pious, what does he look like? White beard? How long is the beard? It's very long. No beard sense. Yeah. You see, this image has never been an image that has existed in Islam, the Quran even. When Allah talks about people of that part, He mentions qualities rather than physical appearance. Every religion has an image of the ideal person. What is the ideal image of a Christian? Do you know? Looks down, wears a cross, does not do anything to society, eats vegetables. He does something bad against himself. It's what it is. Mullah Arabia says Christianity in Europe was that the person believed themselves close to God if they lived in a cave, never took a bath, did not even sit with the female members of their own family. That was the idea. That's what they believe. That's what God wants. Imagine all of us say this. Where was civilization with? Fish. What was Persia? Persian was the same. They have this prototype of a religious figure. Ali is a Begovic in Islam, which in the East knows. He says this: the amazing thing about Islam, Islam does not have one image of one perfect individual. If you look at our Sahaba, they were from different backgrounds. They had different images. They had different clothing. They had different social standards. Some are very rich, some are very poor. But the thing that Islam is after is qualities. All of this can come once you have the qualities inside you. This is why it's very important to understand. Practical religion. Sounds like it's about practical religion more than simply just looking at you. The unity of mankind. Islam is the only religion that works to bring everyone together. Do you know any Christian that wants Christianity to become one again? No. Do you know any Hindu that wants all Hindu? No, because like I told you, this guy, his dad, he worships one God and his mom worships Sai Baba. No religion in the past has ever called for unity. None. Only Islam calls for unity and women's status. Islam is the only religion in the documents mentioned to give honor to women. No other religion. Judaism, in the Talmud, it's mentioned that women are considered to be less than animals. Christianity believe women were created evil. Persians, Hindus, we know they have certain beliefs regarding women. Islam is the only religion, he said, that has. And you can look this up yourself. Look into the religious book. Ask AI, ChatGPT to do this. Wallahi, this was amazing. I don't like saying ChatGPT. ChatGPT is amazing. Allah gave us this better. Use it wisely. But it's fine, very lost. So I said to ChatGPT, I said, be honest. Tell me honestly, which is the most practical religion by examining all the governments? He said, sweet. I said, no. Historic. He said, Abbas, the best government ever from my research. I did a deep search on this. He said that Abbas had gave you all the business. Now I'm going to bring all this information, but we don't have much time to go through it. Do yourself. The idea is we have to understand we are not the ones. I am not promoting Islam because I know Islam. I am promoting Islam because the facts and figures are there for us to check. That's why Allah in the Quran says, see what they know, cover under this. Look at what happened to the people before you. Look at what happened to these people. Look at their system of governance. Look at them. A system of governance might look nice on the outside. It's like, eating nice food, very sweet food, nice cake, looks very nice. But once it goes in your body, then the next day you have to go to the toilet. Maybe it comes out different. This is the reality. Sometimes we get so impacted by the packaging of what they give us, we forget the reality. Inshallah, we'll start today. And after this, inshallah, we are going to start the next month, inshallah. Okay, so we're going to skip some slides because these basically are what I mentioned before. What is a God-centered view? When we say God-centered, it's a very broad term. And so the word God-centered, so God-centered, we mean direct relationship with God, no intermediaries. You don't have to go through someone and don't eat. Our belief in God has to be pure. Yeah, so this takes Christians out, it takes Jews out, it takes. And mercy and accountability, these are three things that Islam is very famous for. Islam is very famous for divine mercy, human dignity, and divine justice. So these are unique to Islam. Likewise, Islam is a very practical way of life. Again, go to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT, which religion caters for every aspect of life? The answer is Islam. There is no other. This is why Islam means submission, that you submit yourself in every aspect of life. And so you have worship, society rules, yeah. You have work rules, family rules, Quran talks about this. If you are reading the Quran, you are reading about nikah. You are reading about talaq. If you are reading the Quran, you are reading about inheritance. If you are reading the Quran, you are reading about fighting against the enemy. If you are reading the Quran, you are reading about justice. You are reading about economy. All of these things, every Muslim is literally reading the whole policy of Islam. So when you do a khatam of Quran, you are going to do everything Allah's command. Amazing, isn't it? Where if you read another religion, you will only be touching on a certain aspect, very fragmented. Again, unity of mankind. So these are four things that Islam has done to create unity. Maybe we think about this in today's time or something. Yeah, so Islam, tribal division. Islam actively gets rid of tribal division, nationalism. There is no difference between if I'm living in Pakistan and if I'm living in Bangladesh. We're both Muslim. The borders should not differentiate us. In fact, there's a very good book I mentioned to you. It's written by a non-Muslim poet, Tim Marshall. It's called Prisoners of Geography. Prisoners of Geography. He was a famous journalist in the 90s. He wrote about why the West cut up these borders. Strategically, they cut the borders Middle East and all these countries because they had ideologies behind it. And Bosnia, they split between the Bosnians and Serbs. Islamic equality, right? So when people say it was no, Islam gives special status to Arabs. No, there's no special status to Arabs. There is no special. The only thing in where the Arabs have special status is the language. That's it. You do not even need to know Arabic to be a good Muslim. Nothing. Some people say, no, they know, but that's your own culture. That's your inclined to love for maybe Rasulullah, you want to copy the way he wears clothes. That's not necessarily what Islam enforced on Zaman. Ibadah is not unique to Arabs. Jihad is not unique to Arabs. Policy is not unique to Arabs. Brotherhood. Islam brings people together. We're all ummatun wahidah. We're all ikhwatun and global community. This point, I can't even emphasize it. You know, if you went back 1,000 years ago, there was no concept of global. There wasn't. Because they had not mapped out the whole earth. Today, we can travel the whole globe in one day. Today, we can hear the news of Australia, simultaneously in Africa, Europe. We have become a small global village. Economy has become global. There was no such thing as global economy. There was no such thing as people traveling 4,000 miles for a job, for education. This was never, everything was localized. That's why, remember, I told you about change. If you don't understand change, you will be stuck 1,000 years ago. So we have to understand today it's global. Challenges are global. So when, like, for example, if someone says, I will only fight with sword and bow and arrow. You know bow and arrow? Yeah, I will only fight with sword and bow and arrow because this is how they done this 1,000 years ago. So let's say that. We'll see what will happen to you. And what Alimiya says, he says, the reason why Muhammad al-Fatih conquered Constantinople, yeah, in what year was it? 1458. You know why? It's because of military dominance. He built a cannon, no cannon. What do you call cannon? He built a cannon that requires 700 men to put it. And the ball of the cannon was 100 kilos to 300 kilos. And it would fire 1 mile off the. Basically, it was a cutting edge technology. This was cutting edge technology. Who was making this? He comes a man from Armenia. This border that was controlled by Ottomans. Now, that's from Armenia, that's the designer. So you imagine now, if someone says to you, Muhammad found the Congress doesn't know because to make dua for Allah. Of course, every Muslim makes dua for Allah. Allah says, "Idu lahum mastata'tum." Utilize what Allah has given you the resources on the earth to donate your energy. You have to understand it's a right. So global, you ever understand this? So these are, I say, four things making that will cause barriers of unity. If you look at the world why Muslims are not coming together, it's most likely one of these four things. Yeah. Brotherhood, like like tribalism, it's the opposite of tribalism. And global is more to do with that geography. You could be same tribe. I have a time, for example, Pashto. Yeah. If I meet another person, I speak Pashto with you. Yeah. Automatically. Maybe someone is Memon, they meet another Memon in England, they start speaking Memon with them. So this would be tribalism. Yeah. That we have to overcome these things between ourselves, inshallah. All right, next. Right. Practical religion. Right. So Islam is a practical religion. We'll talk about this next one. Okay, next one. Okay, Quranic impact. So what did the Quran do to impact society so much? Three things. Number one, literacy. So it transformed the Arab society from unlettered, illiterate, 95%. This is a very good book, I'll tell you. It's written by, have you heard of Akbar Shah Najib? Akbar Shah Najib was the right-hand man of Ghulam Mirza Qadian. Then he became, and he became a very good historian. And he's written a 3-volume book called Tariq Islam, History of Islam. And it's been translated into English as well. And I would say it's probably one of the most comprehensive books of the entire history of Muslim history. Very comprehensive, very well written, and he gives his understanding as well. And he has very much love for Allah and His Prophet. So Akbar Shah he mentions that he says, from my research, I found it was only 12 people in Makkah that knew how to read and write. Now you can imagine, Makkah only has 12 people who know how to read and write, and then in less than 20 years, 95% of people become literate. Look how fast things happen. Look, and where this comes from? Allah. Literacy, scholarship. Muslims became scholars in every field. You can literally. There is a book. Let me find it. There is a book called. Okay, there's a book called House of Wisdom. House of Wisdom, written by the same Professor Jonathan Lyons. House of Wisdom. What is House of Wisdom? House of Wisdom, in the time of Abbas Khilafah, Abbas, there was a Khalifa called Ma'mun Rashid. Ma'mun Rashid, he built, you can almost say, one of the first universities of the Muslims, where he invited all religion scholars to come and participate, to present their contributions. And this book, the non-Muslim has written this. But he's amazing. Why? Because he also points out why non-Muslims are trying to change the names of Muslim scholars. Ibn Sina, do you know what they call him in Nurse? Avicenna. Ibn Rushd. Averroes. Why are they changing these names? Because they know that Muslims were the ones who will be found on their heritage. You change the name of something, Muslims will never think about it. Maybe out of 100 Muslims, 2 people will know this man was. So I went to Uzbekistan maybe 3 months ago. I would definitely recommend to go to Uzbekistan. Muslim country, a lot of nice food, and nice. It's got lots of history. And Ibn Sina was from Uzbekistan. And why is Ibn Sina important? For 2 reasons Ibn Sina is very important. Ibn Sina, he was the first person to understand Greek philosophy, Plato and Aristotle. The West now takes from Ibn Sina the understanding of Greek philosophy because they had no one else to translate it. No one else to understand it because the language was very, cryptic, almost. And number two, he's famous for medicine. Why is Ibn Sina famous for medicine? Because before Ibn Sina, sometimes you hear maybe there's many Arabs who go at medicine. Ibn Sina was important because before Ibn Sina, all medicine, all illnesses were grouped into one problem. So if you had a mental problem is one. If you had a body illness, it was one. Ibn Sina, he broke down and said that the body, if you have a problem, your arm's hurting, the cause is something different. If you have a problem in your stomach, the cause, he developed different causes. So he would tackle the different causes. Whereas before that, it was just you're either ill or you're not. And you get the same medicine, drill a hole in the head. Allah knows. So the reality, so Ibn Sina was groundbreaking. Of course, we don't follow Ibn Sina's medicine today. We follow Western medicine when you go to become a doctor. But you have to understand, he broke the barrier for those things. That's why his works are studied even till today in Europe as that. So this is a good book. Another good book I'll tell you about, which is Making of Humanity. So Making of Humanity is by Robert Briffault. So Mona Ali Mia mentioned this. Amazing thing of Mona Ali Mia was he read more English books than he did Arabic books in this work of his. Just look at the bibliography, how many books he read, you'll see yourself. And he said, I wrote this book before World War II. Before World War II, he writes this, then becomes famous 10 years later. So the reason why Robert Briffault is very good at Making Humanity is because Making Humanity has a section there regarding how the West has been trying to hide the names of famous Muslim scholars. So he lists scholars in medicine, astronomy, geography, botany, politics, a whole list of names he has. It's actually very good books. I'm going to mention some more as we go through each one. You know about the Orion's belts? You heard of Orion's belts? Orion's belts is 3 stars that are very close together. So on the right hand side, Betelgeuse. That word, they say, comes from the word Ibtul Joza. Ibt means armpit. It's like a guy pulling an arrow. Ibtul Joza. There's many stars in the sky, many words in English about cave, al-gaf, coffee, qahwa, algorithm, al-khawarizm, Uzbekistan. Again, so scholarship, literacy, scholarship, and leadership. Leadership is the key issue here. Leadership is what made Muslims who they were. Because without leadership, your religion is restricted to your house, to your mosque. You are like, goldfish inside the bowl. You are just doing your rounds and doing your tawaf. That's it. You read the Quran, you will see this. Islam will never shine if you don't have Islamic governance. You can live for 100, 200 years of Christians. Christians have no more governance. There's lots of Christians around the world, they have no power anymore. You can make fun of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, they don't say nothing. You can insult their God, nothing. This is why we have to understand governance is very, very significant what Islam will show. Yeah. Okay, next. Now, Islam's major transformations, so these are the 4 things that you can possibly say Islam brought into the world that were not really there. Yeah, to make a note of that. Okay, spiritually, I want to go through this. You've heard this in Jummah khutbahs. The Imam and Shu'afullah will tell you about how beautiful Islam unmatched love Sahaba had for Rasulullah. Physical protection. They protected the Prophet even in battle with their own chest. And material sacrifice. They would give all their wealth for Rasulullah. Now, what does this show us? This shows us if you have this level of dedication, you can't beat these people. Can't beat them. There's no money in the world that can pay Abu Bakr. There is no money in the world that can pay Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Ali. That's because they understood it was not about the policies, it was about Allah and His Rasul. And this is why, if you look today, you will find this about Muslim soldiers, their idea of dying in the battle is not lost. For them, it is honor. Whereas if you look at the news of anyone else who dies in a battle, it's very sad news. Very upset. Next. Political and legal brilliance. Now, this you can just maybe take a picture of it or just look at it. We all know about the Sirah. I don't want to go through the Sirah. Normally, when it's a 9-hour course, I go through a lot of detail. Constitution of Medina. The Prophet ﷺ comes to Medina. He realizes there are different communities living. You cannot have a rule which is only for Muslims. You have to have a rule that's inclusive. So he develops the Constitution of Medina again. Akbar Shah Najib Abadi, he writes about the Constitution of Medina in his book. I think it's in volume 1. He writes about that. Rule of law. No one is above the law. This is very important. No society had this. In Islam, no one is above the law. Everyone is accountable. If you're a father, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, he said, every individual, كلكم راع, is a shepherd. وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Everyone will be questioned about their subjects. We understand this. You're in Pakistan, you're a father, you're responsible. You're a mother, you're responsible. You are a community leader, you are responsible. If you are president, you are responsible. Everyone is responsible. Nobody has a loophole in the law. Nobody. And governance is based on revelation. So every policy we make about the government, there has to be something that does not go against the Quran or Rasul. Yes. Okay, now these are just an overview, roughly what happened. Very interesting. Why were there so many battles in Sirah? 27 battles Rasul participated in Sirah. Why does anyone know? Why is it significant? Why can't we just have Sirah when everyone holds hands and everyone goes to the masjid and goes back home and anything happens, everyone is the salah finished? No, it's totally else. Something I mentioned earlier. Okay, very good. In fact, I'm just going to speak this over. I actually did a course, a 1-day course on Sirah from the Quran. So just from the Quran. How the Sirah, very interesting book I read. It's in Arabic. It's called The Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ from the Quran by Muhammad Darusa. Muhammad Darusa wrote the whole book just from the Quran, not from the Hadith. And when I studied that, I was amazed how Allah shows the Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ in Makkah all the way to. And it's very interesting that battles played a very significant role in showing authority. Imagine someone comes to rob your house. What do you do? You either find a safe room, lock the door, and you hide, or you try to protect. This is exactly the response. Remember, we talked about Asabiya. You have to have that inside yourself to a degree to protect your life. We will have this. So this is why the battles show that we cannot have Islam existing on earth without protecting its rights. You must be ready. Very simple. So those people who say Islam is a peaceful religion, what happened in Badr? What happened in Muhammad? Not very peaceful. What happened in Khandaq? How did Muhammad Fatih take over? Constantine. We are not promoting violence, no. We are promoting protection of rights. Let's flip this over. Military intervention by the UN. What is that called? Remember, I told you earlier the terms. You label it in a nice way, you get away with it. If you label it in a different way, you call this jihad, they will not leave. But we have to understand they are doing the same thing that we say in our books. It's just that they have labeled it in a nice, posh, nice word, and now everyone thinks about it. Yeah, when the West wants to bomb Iraq, it's okay. It's for protection of democracy and women's rights. But then you just change the name. You have to be very careful of the language you use. I think today, our youngsters should learn the language of the world thing. Sorry, it's an actual thing. They use that a lot. Okay, next one. Okay, so first revelation, Hijrah to Medina, major battles, conquest of Makkah, prophets, Rasul Sallallahu passing away. We all know about this in the Sirah. Again, I don't want to go through these. Okay, next one. Yeah, now, education revolution, from illiteracy to scholarship. So this is something we have talked about already. So you know all of this. So we can move on from here, inshallah. Now, this is a summary. You take a picture of this. Yeah. This is the summary to give you an idea of what Islam actually produced. Right? So you've got moral, social, scientific, educational, literacy and philosophy, economic and governance. These are not small contributions. These are like, global changing contributions to Islam. And so, for example, moral and social, human rights, accountability. Why was it that the West only came out with human rights? 32 points of the Geneva Convention, just less than 100 years ago. Where were they before 100 years? Islam already had these in place. They had rights for people, protections, which was built into their system. They did not need to have the people come together and tell them 32 points. Scientific algebra, where did algebra come from? Algebra, medicine, optics, astronomy, education, translation movement. This is phenomenal. The first time ever books from one culture were translated into another culture and preserved. We know Greeks translated Egyptian, but it's not preserved, it's lost. The Muslims, for the first time in Ma'mun al-Rashid's Khilafat, they translated major works. And that translation motivates the Jews, it motivates the Christians, it motivates everyone else to share knowledge. So this is why, again, it's very important for us today's time to share information. Sharing knowledge is very good. We are not against the Western ideas which do not clash with Islam. So we have to try and bridge. This is why Muhammad Asad says this as well. Islam, he says that Islam is not against the West. Islam is against ideologies that conflict with Islam. And literature, debates is very important. We hear so much Abu Hanifa rahimahullah debates with atheists. Imam Ghazali debates with people. This debating is help. It's a sign of healthy society. You can't say don't speak against Maulana Sahib. Oh, why? If there is a debate, maybe this debate will help people understand a little bit more. So debating works, not debating where they shout at each other and they swear at each other. This is not healthy debate. This is, jahili. And economic governance, zakat. Look at the zakat system. No religion in the world has a sophisticated distribution of charity except Islam. Again, check this yourself. You don't believe me? Check Judaism, check Christianity, check even secularism. Secularism does not have a way of distributing wealth to the poor it always ends up making the rich richer. You'll see this with someone. Wakaf. I personally say this. Wakaf is endowment. Endowment basically means that, let's say, for example, we have in, I don't know, Bahadurabad, we have, how many masjids in Bahadurabad? 7, 8, let's say 10. So we say, we're not going to collect money from the people. We're going to finish Jannah. We do Jannah in July. We finish this. What we will do now, we will go to the people and we will develop our wakafs. We collect money. We can invest in properties. We invest in different businesses. And the earnings from there, we will cover all the rest. All the madrasas, all the hospitals. Did you know, in the Muslim world, no one ever had to pay for education? Ever. No one had to pay for medicine, as in medical fees. No one had to pay for these services because they were all covered by Waqf. Even remember recently in India, the government wants to take the Waqf off the Muslims. You probably heard about this in the news 6-7 months ago. Ottoman Empire, even till today, Harvard University, because they were all covered by Waqf. Even remember recently in India, the government wants to take the Waqf off the Muslims. You probably heard about this in the news 6-7 months ago. Ottoman Empire, even till today, Harvard University has a Waqf. Oxford University, where they learned this from? Muslims of Spain. So Waqf is a very powerful ethical leadership. Okay? Next slide. Now, these are some, you can take a picture of this. This is just a few non-exhaustive lists of institutes around the world. Today, if someone says to you, I have studied medicine in Cambridge University, you will say, wow, this guy, mashallah. Yeah? Because actually you have this whole, about this place, Harvard University, he studied, I don't know, economics in Harvard University. Wow, this is the guy my daughter's marrying. Yes. You have to understand, these universities are only been around recently. I went in London, I went to visit Westminster School. Westminster School is a very tough school. Its fees are, I don't know, maybe 20,000-30,000 pounds a month. They're very expensive. So not everyone goes there. I went to visit. Non-Muslims, they have one subject which is called, yes, Quranic Arabic. Even till today they teach. And I said, maybe they start this from 1600s. 500 years ago, they used to go to Spain. And to go to Spain, they had to know Arabic. So they would teach the elites Arabic. They would go to Spain and learn medicine, optometry, whatever, geography. When you hear Isaac Newton, you know he knew Arabic. When you hear about Fibonacci, have you heard of Fibonacci? The golden Fibonacci number here. You know Arabic? Most of these famous scientists, Copernicus who said the Earth spins around the sun, it doesn't, So, so the books I mentioned to you, Making of Humanity, actually mentions this. They tell you most of the Western famous scientists actually borrowed their ideas from Muslims and deleted their names. So Baghdad, famous Baitul Hikmah, this was a major project by Ma'mun Rashid. Ma'mun Rashid can say whatever you want about him. He was influenced by Mu'tazili thinking. But the contributions he made were very decisive. Cordoba, Spain. Yeah, again, Cordoba was one of the cities, first city in the whole of Europe that had streetlights. 300 years before Paris. Streetlights. 300 years before. And they say when the Christians took over Spain, what stopped them from continuing and taking over all the other Muslim lands? The Black Plague. Very bad illness. You know why the Muslims didn't get Black Plague as much as the non-Muslims? Because Muslims did good. All you have to do is wash your hands and wash your face. Cleanliness. And these people, remember I told you, they will not even take a bath. And you know, when I say this, you're probably thinking maybe this guy isn't like Europeans. No, I'm saying this because the queen Elizabeth, there used to be a queen in England called Queen Elizabeth. She only took a bath once a year. She was famous once. Right, once a year, Muslim. Yeah, keep yourself. Cairo, Egypt, Azhar University. Azhar University was actually established by the Ismaili sect. Right, talk about the timeline. But again, cycle the Ismaili sect formation and then peak and then decline. And then, you know, Salahuddin Ayyubi took over. And then Samarkand and Bukhara, these were amazing places again. Because, again, there was so much rich scholarship there. All the famous scholars. The Darsin Nizami, you heard of the Darsin Nizami? I would say 60 to 70% of the books of Darsin Nizami came from authors Samarkand and Bukhara. That's how important this place is historically. But today you go there, you can't learn Islam unless you are 18 years old. The Imam is not allowed to keep a beard. Because Soviet influence. And literally all of the signs of Islam have been wiped out. Society. Is that how we lost Islam? If Allah wants to change things, Allah is Malik, He is the one who's in control. تؤتي الملك من تشاء تعز من تشاء تذل من تشاء. We always have to ask Allah. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, these are cultural transmission to Europe. So remember, Europe was not Europe. Europe was fragmented kingship. They hated each other. They were always fighting. Then Renaissance happened 500 years ago. So Europe now becomes, I'll talk more about this later. Where did they get most of their knowledge from? Spain. Muslim Spain. Al-Andalus. They go there, they study, they come back. Translation movement we talked about. And European Renaissance. Again, this is something very fun to figure out in more detail. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, I'll take a picture of this if you want. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I just mentioned to you one thing. This is, subhanAllah, look at this. You know, when we say the word religion, this is not really a word we should be using, in my view. There's only one religion star. What do I mean, guys? What I mean is, a religion has to be able to cater for every aspect of life. Judaism only came for a short span of time for a certain group of people who we call Islam. That's it. It only came for that. It wasn't designed for me and you. It wasn't designed for the 21st century. So if someone tries to take Judaism today, it's like taking a system that only worked in India 1,000 years ago and saying, oh, we have to implement it this way. It's never designed. Christianity has never ever been designed to be global. It cannot work. Remember I told you Constantine? He did not implement Christianity. He implemented Roman secular thought. That's why, this is an interesting part. When people hate religion, who do they normally hate?
The preacher.
They hate religion as a Christian, as a Jew. If you go to Google and type in debates, you will find most people who have arguments against religion. You look at the arguments, the 10 top arguments, they will always be against things that are famous in Judaism, Christian, not in Islam. You won't find this in Islam. So when they say they hate religion, when you speak to them and you tell them about Islam, it's actually, I like this. It makes sense too. This is why, subhanAllah, if you look nowadays, a lot of people are coming towards Islam rather than these two religions. Anyway, this is a long topic to talk about. Remember, I was telling you things like prophet archetype. According to Judaism, a prophet is a warrior, a national hero. According to Christians, a prophet is a suffering savior. The idea is hate the world, forgive everyone, But the Islamic view is a practical leader, statesman, and moral leader. That's what a prophet is in the Islamic religion. Now, anyway, why am I bringing all this? I'm bringing this because every religion, I don't like calling it a religion, but I'm interested. Every religion is deficient in today's time, apart from Islam, because Islam has provided the solution for every layer of the problem in society, from leader all the way to the street cleaner. Every part has a solution. Christianity only has select. Judaism has select. This is why in the Quran, look at this, Allah says, كَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Why is that we have made the Muslims the middle ummah? لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ, so you can be witnesses with everyone else. Everyone can look at you and make you the model of how to run society. And this is interesting. Many of you probably heard this about when the colonialists went to India, a lot of what they saw from the governance, the Muslim governance, was actually taken back to UK. England. And the first ever translation of a book called Hidayah, you know the book called Hidayah, Hanafi fiqh, this was what the judges used to use to give ruling, was translated into English by colonialists. The first ever translation into English. You see this pattern. That's why in Islam, I say Islam is the only religion. If you're going to debate someone, first clarify to them, which religion are you talking about? What ideology, what system are you talking about? Yeah. Because someone can say today, oh, Islam doesn't give rights to women. Say, okay, there's ideological rights that you want to give women, practical rights. Let's give women their rights. What rights should we give women? Women can work. Islam allows them to work, no problem. It just says you're going to work, make sure you dress appropriately. Make sure you earn these halal, make sure you reach your husband's permission. Okay. Islam allows women Islam doesn't allow women education. Where's this? Is it in the Quran? Is it from Rasulullah, who is his own wife, Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha, used to be the teacher of 200 men. She taught 200 men. So the idea is we have to be confident in our own Islam, learn about your own Islam, and make sure don't conflate. You don't mix this up with Judaism, understanding of religion, or Christianity. Otherwise, you will find it hard to. You will find it hard to. And this is the disclaimer, okay? This, don't take. Maybe you accept what I said, maybe you disagree. Not every Maulana or Mufti represents the full Islam. It's a version they represent. Yeah. Hanafi madhab is a version of a time, like a window in trying to understand Sharia. Maliki madhab is a version in understanding. Shafi madhab, these are all versions of trying to understand. The ultimate is Sharia. Yeah. We have to interpret in whatever way we go. Next slide. Now, unfortunately, loss of moral and spiritual leadership. Why do we lose these moral and spiritual leadership in our society? Three things. Yeah, it all boils down to three things. What are the three things? So have a read of this. I'll just have a bit of this. Have a read of this. Okay, so what's happening here? Why are we losing this amazing system that we have? Why is it declining so quickly? Number one, lack of sincerity. This happens in every institute. Wherever the institute starts off, mashallah, you start off with those who sacrifice their nights and they study hard. Then slowly, when that institute becomes established, people are focusing more on the policies and the rules rather than the substance. This is always happening in the government. The Sahaba's days, it was about i'la kalimatillah. But then later on, after that, it became more about just, concepts of leader, president, this, that. And so now it's simply just become about the leader. Back up sincerity. Yeah, that was that. And it happens in families as well, unfortunately. So hereditary politics. Hereditary politics is what we call nepotism. Stays in the family. Leader dies, stays in the family. So also dies. This is something which is not a nice thing, but unfortunately, it seems to always happen in Islamic history. In Islamic history, after Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, this was fire. And we know there's a problem here because leadership should be given according to merit, not according to which family you belong to. Yeah, and this is the thing that we have to be careful about in our society as well. And there's a few exceptions, as we can see. Sayyidina Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and many others who came along to try to change things. But the dominance will always be this. Unfortunately, Islamic governance will never be perfect ever. After all, if Rashidun, no. One hadith mentions where Mahdi returns, there will be, rising of war. But that's it. We're not going to have, so we have to get used to the idea that we are not going to have perfect rulers. Once we understand this, we feel comfortable. We know Rasul Sallallahu and Khulafa Rashidun came with the best model. We're going to try to work towards that model as best as we can. We're never going to have perfection. We had Muslim rulers, unfortunately, some of them drank wine. You have to go. Some of them never used to praise Allah. Some of them used to do bad things. We are responsible for them if Allah is going to take them into account. But what we are responsible for is ourselves and our time spent. Okay, next one. Okay, again, this is something you can take a page on. Luxury and materialism, it destroys anything. Why is it that luxury and materialism, it eats away at a person's Islam? They don't know. Because it makes you love life more than values. Yeah. Wealth, extravagance, competing monuments. You look anywhere you go. Why didn't I remember once we went to Palestine, we went to a place called Jericho. I've heard of Jericho. So Jericho is one of the oldest cities in the whole world. And there was a palace built there by one of the Umayyad Khalifas. And it's in ruins now. And I was thinking, why did he have to build a palace? That same money would have been spent. Allah was missing. So these buildings, Muslims for some reason felt they had to spend millions to build a building as though sovereignty is inside the buildings. That is amazing. What is this? Who are the ones who are building the biggest buildings today? For some reason, Muslims feel they have to build. And this is Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam words. Here at the end of times, we'll be competing with one another in who can make the biggest building. Next one. Okay. Now, intellectual deviation, I think, is very important. Look, Alhamdulillah, Pakistan has so many madrasas here. MashaAllah. India has so many madrasas. Bangladesh, so many madrasas here. However, we should never be complacent with that. Generally change. We always have to check the system. Is the teaching that is being done producing the ulama that we need for? Imagine, for example, you have universities, and they did not check whether the graduates were capable of becoming doctors for today or engineers. You wouldn't have these big buildings. You wouldn't have engineering weeks. You wouldn't have scholarship. Just because a system worked hundreds of years ago doesn't mean we have to keep it at that. Otherwise, it becomes like a museum. You go inside the museum this way, and then you follow this way, you come out this way after 8 years. And that's it. Yeah, that's the sad reality. We shouldn't be shy of questioning these things. If anyone wants to send their children to a madrasa, check the system of the madrasa. Check their curriculum. Check how they're being taught. What is the outcome of this? What will he have when he comes out of this? what will she have when she comes out to this? We need to create ulama who have the ability to make changes in the community. And this is something for us to think about. Now, I don't have the solutions before you come to me and ask, how should we build all this up? Every society needs to look at their own problems and challenges. Neglect don't provide guidance. From my point of view, I would think, this is from my own view, maybe you're really good, maybe I think every Muslim at least should know what the Quran says. Every single Muslim should know what Surah Baqarah says. Every single Muslim. Most of these social media videos, and if they are finished, we just knew what the Quran says. Finished. Very basic. Language of the Quran is very easy. Any translation you can pick up. If you don't understand something in translation, go and ask someone. Ask the scholar, ask someone who knows. Plus, the idea we have to empower Muslims, because if we don't empower Muslims, we're going to become like the Persians who only have a handful of people who know the religion, and everyone else like sheep. We just follow. And superstition, this is sign. Superstition is a sign that the society is in decay. When you have superstition, because superstition goes against rationality. Islam is called rational. Everything makes sense in Islam. So when you think of superstition, what do you call superstition in the Quran? Wearing it, yeah, like, or you want salt fell on the floor, this didn't happen now. Yeah, you didn't do this. All of these things, the Prophet ﷺ, he removed superstition from society. So we have to, be very clear. Our religion will be affected by people who will dispose. This will happen. Remember, it happened with the Jews, it happened with the Christians, it will happen with Islam. You will get people who will come with another prophet. Allah is giving this guy right. They will come with this. We have to maintain the limits of Islam. We will have debates with each other. We will get a bit heated up. That's okay. Alhamdulillah, we continue healthy. Now, political disunity pretty much destroyed every Muslim society. Political disunity is, unfortunately, we almost say, the main key to triggering disunity. Umayyads in Spain, political disunity. What do I mean by political disunity? Political disunity basically is like where the public says, look at these ulama, they can't be on each other. Look at our politicians, they can't be on each other. It makes them feel as though Islam does not have the solution. That's the problem. Political disunity in Spain. Spain, 700 years of Spain. What destroyed Spain? One Muslim group making allies in Christians to destroy the other Muslims. Does this sound familiar today? One Muslim country making trade agreements with a non-Muslim country, and the deal is you have to destroy this Muslim country first to make them weak. I don't know. Where's the brotherhood? Where's the global understanding of Islam? Abbasiyun, Baghdad, internal uprisings. The Fatimids were the Muslims, the Ismailis that used to live in Spain for 300 years. That's from the 320 roughly, all the way to about 600. This is where they were, Ismailis. They're a group of Shias. So again, same thing happened. So we have to expect we will get internal fighting will happen. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, I asked Allah 3 things. And one of the things he said was, I asked Allah not to make my ummah fight with each other. It's Allah that likes us. Ummah will always fight with each other. The thing is, how do we tackle this? This is why we come here. Try to come with a solution over here. If people keep arguing about the fighting between the Sahaba, if Sahaba are fighting between each other, who are we? We will also have fighting. But we have to work towards the global benefit of Muslims. Next one. Okay. Now, some things that Mullah Abu Hassan Nadwi says caused a lot of problems over the years, especially after roughly 600 Hijrah. Salahuddin Ayyubi after Salahuddin Ayyubi, these 3 things became very prominent. Number one, the closure of ijtihad. So some ulama said no more ijtihad. Ijtihad basically means to come out with an answer for a new problem. They said we cannot do ijtihad anymore. Finish. And Abu Hassan al-Rahimullah says, for a leader, he has to have two things to be a healthy leader: jihad and ijtihad. Militarily, you have to be strong, you have to be cutting edge military, and you always have to come out with solutions for new problems. He said, whenever a leader stops these two things, he said, the society goes decline. So we have to have ijtihad. Ijtihad is still happening today. What is the ruling of someone getting married one part of the world through Zoom? Scholars will differ on this issue. We don't have an answer from Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik. It's an ikhtilaf issue. What is the ruling of in today's time organ transplantation? There will be difference of opinion. What is the ruling of living on Mars? The ruling. What is the ruling of, a woman traveling without her mahram in today's times? They're different ruling. There will be ijtihad, cryptocurrency, blockchain, politics, using nuclear weapons. Rise of taqleed. Now, what we mean by rise of taqleed is when we become blind to a particular view and we don't want to accept other people's views. Now, this is one thing I have personally seen. You don't mean that Pakistan. This again, sometimes I say a view, and I'm just saying this just to think out loud. Yeah, not to say that this is the ultimate view, but just to kind of make it. In Pakistan, there seems to be very strong tension between Redmi, Diwandi, Salafi. When I live in the UK, we don't have this problem. Small individuals with those problems, the majority will take behind each other. We go to each other's events. I do not know, maybe it's in the wars of Pakistan. Maybe some historic tension between groups, family issues, Allah knows best. If you go to Europe, you don't have these problems. Go to America, you don't have these problems already. Maybe because the problems are different. So we have to understand sometimes we have to bridge gaps between communities in order for us to achieve the ultimate. A man came to Rasulullah one day and he said, so and so is like this. He said, does he say La ilaha illallah? I said, yes. Does he face towards our Qibla? I said, yes. Does he eat our meat? I said, yes. There is a Muslim. He's not a Muslim. Some things keep rolling. You don't have to split hairs to find out, which part is. Scientific decline is one. For some reason, we have left scientific discoveries. And now, what's the result of this? When we have military, we have to buy it from abroad. Technology, we have to buy it from abroad. AI, from abroad. Engineers, we have to get it from abroad. What do we create locally? That's the question. Why are we not creating all of these things locally? Again, it's just something person. Again, physically, external problems that the Muslims faced were the Crusades. So the Crusades, I'm going to show you on the map. I'm going to show you the map. Took 8 times Crusades took place. What is the Crusade? So Crusade is when the Christians of Europe all got together to take over Palestine and to try to weaken the Muslims. Yeah. The first crusade was successful according to them. For 90 years, they go over Masjid al-Aqsa. Even if you go today to Masjid al-Aqsa, you see signs of the crusaders inside Masjid al-Aqsa. And called the Templars. Nice Templars, they have signs there. They're kept. So crusade was one of the things that really weakened the Muslims. Why were the Muslims affected by crusades? Not because they were physically weak in internal fight. They were so weak because nowadays the West looks at Muslim countries around the world, how weak these people are. All you have to do is give them some extra money. All you have to do is give them some nice incentive, and they will do whatever you want. This is what the Crusaders meant. This is how you divide and you conquer. And the Mongol invasion. Now, Mongol invasion is interesting because, Mongols, Kyrgyzstan, Southern Western. So The Mongol invasion was not religiously motivated. Mongol invasion was because the Muslims were being oppressive. They were doing zulm to the Mongols. Again, read Shah Najib Abadi's section on this. Interesting, very interesting. It was because of the Muslims they did this. And very interesting, when he went to Baghdad, he took the leader of Baghdad, Abbasi, he put him in a room with all of his treasures, and he said, now survive now. And he starved to death. Because this is what we were after. We collected all this wealth and we put up some ordered your reason. Remember, Sayyid al-Mulk, Khalid. Leader of the people is the Khalid. This is what we forgot. So the Mongols, an interesting thing. Mongols, Olivia says, the Mongols accepted Islam within 90 years. Remember we said the formation peak, they declined so much when they saw Islam because the Mongols did not have a structure to run a civilization. Islam already had that. It makes sense. Okay, next one. Okay, now, in recent times, European colonization, Orientalism, and educational shift. These are three things that has affected us in the last 300 years. In the last 300 years, Europeans colonialization. Now, we don't have time for this, but what I would recommend on YouTube, there is a video that someone has done, and I think it's called The History of Colonization in Africa. And they've worked out all the countries that were colonized by Europe, one by one, how long, what they took from them. So European colonization starting off from Africa. And then it started to move towards India and it moved towards other parts of the world. And you have American colonization as well, by Columbus. So European colonization went all the way up to the Philippines. Yeah, all the way up to the Philippines. Imagine, Philippines, what's the capital of the Philippines? Manila. You know what they used to be called? Amandallah. You see, almost 100%. There's a lot of Muslim names that we have around the world. You can still see them, but they're just now it's the majority Christian name. And Orientalism is very important. There's a very good book I would recommend. Two authors I definitely recommend in Orientalism. One is Edward Said. Edward Said has written a book called Orientalism. He's a Christian Lebanese. And he breaks down Orientalism. And the second one is Maulana Muhammad Mustafa Azami. Maulana Muhammad Mustafa Azami, Maulana studied in Darul, and then he also studied in Cambridge with the teacher there. So he's written against Orientalism because, unfortunately, most of our understanding of Islam seems to come from some sort of secular approach. So, I don't know, like Golden Shah, Golden Molu, and Goldzia. These are all Jews who talk about Hadith, who talk about Qur'an. In fact, I've actually got on YouTube, I've done a whole podcast. I think it's 2.5 hours long on Taha Hussein. Very interesting. So check that out. It's on blogging theology. The blogging theology. Check out there. Put out our Taha Hussein. I think there I explained about Orientalism and how Orientalism affected Egypt as a university. So there's a lot of history behind that. So Orientalism is great. Now, why is Orientalism got to do with Europe? Because in Europe, remember I told you? So imagine, for example, like this is Europe, okay? Europe is more fragmented. Salahuddin Ayyubi comes, all of a sudden, all the Christians get together to find a common enemy. You know that nationalism, National Asabiya starts. Then Muhammad is over here. Slowly but surely, people begin to cut themselves off from Christianity. So we hear a little Macbeth, where the first time secularism, a governance without religion, was started because the hate for the Christian church was increasing. more people hate Christianity. Because they hated Christianity, they hated all religions. So the early Orientalists were actually Christian. It was Christian motivated. So they would send people to India, they would send people to all these countries to learn Hadith, to learn Qur'an, and then to teach it. So some of the famous Orientalists actually lived in India, and lived in Egypt, and lived in all these countries. Okay. Then next. You can just take a picture of this now. Look. So what's the cause of civilization decline in Muslim world? Why is it that Muslims are not at the cutting edge of society today? Most of the reason is what? Internal. The only two reasons I can find that were external were the invasions, crusades, and colonialism. If it wasn't for these two things, Islam, Muslims are the reason for the only time. Can't find anything else. This is the sad reality. And this is what it seems as though we're still in today, fighting amongst each other. Because we don't have a strong governance, we don't have the ability to speak up for Gaza, Kashmir, for Sudan, so many countries. We have no voice. All we can do is just make a statement. We're very upset about what's happening over here. 2 months later, another problem. But in that time, you imagine saying that all Khattab's time, Gaza was happening today. He wouldn't be sitting in Medina. He would already be planning the armies to go there. Next one. Okay, now, the fall of the Caliphate and the colonial aftermath. This was a very sad time. Muslim country, For the first time in history, there is no Islamic state. This is when the Khilafah of Osmaniya finished. And again, this is very interesting how it would happen. Osmani Khilafah stretched approximately 700 years, almost 700 years, almost the same as same. What brought it down? Of course, it was development of Europe. And the major thing was the decline of Muslims to themselves. And who was the one that actually was the representative of the decline? A Muslim Atabek. He changed overnight. He took away all the Arabic script and changed it Latin. That's how much he disliked Arabic influence on Turkish. It was like Asabiya. He didn't like it. Arabian influence. Again, there was many other issues. Again, there's a lot to talk about over here. How, because many of you guys know the Hanafi Mazhab. There was two major Khilafas who were famous for Hanafi Mazhab: the Abbasis and the Ottomans. Osmaniya has amazing works there. But even inside of that, we can see problems being ended. So, for example, when the Khilafah declined, many of the scholars were exiled from Sheikh Zayed, those that he Mustafa somebody, many others, famous scholars, very good scholars. European colonization. So European colonization was basically a way to make them sound richer. Because remember, for a government to work, you have to have finance. Most of the governments of today spend the majority of their budget on what? Military. That's what you have to work. And it's not something that is unfair. It's actually for protection of sovereignty. These people became richer than the Muslims. Muslims did not want, for some reason, interesting thing is on, for some reason, a lot of these spiritual groups, Rumi, Wahidi, and Arabi, they all appeared in the decline era. So there seems to be this link when Muslims were seeing themselves decline, they also cut themselves off from politics. They just seclude themselves. So you see this pattern in history. That's another article starts. In India, Mughal India. We don't know what happened in Mughal India. Same thing. one of the longest running Muslim empires. Problem was what? Problem was internal fighting. One group, one another group. And eventually what seemed to happen is everyone just gives up and said, those are power. Yeah, it's loose. Nothing wrong with Khanka. If the Khanka is going to be the boxer, you're going to leave politics in the hands of people who don't love Allah and Rasul Sallallahu, then where the one's strength? Yes, no. Okay, you take measures. Now, control computer and identity crisis. This is just a general. This is just a general kind of 4 points. Muslims are suffering at the moment inferiority complex, education transformation, cultural displacement, colonial psychological impact. Yeah. So let me give you some examples. So, inferiority complex. Today, unfortunately, this is a sad reality, but for some reason we feel that someone from the West can do a better job than a person who's got the same qualifications from the East. And how do we know this? Because we've seen this in especially Middle Eastern countries. They will give the same position, someone with a lighter skin color in Europe, he gets more wage than a person with a dark inferiority complex. We have this feeling they feel unfairness. When a celebrity talks about Islam, it seems they know better than Qur'an and education transformation. Our whole system of education now in Pakistan is based on Western education. Yeah? You go through, you do these particular courses, get this qualification, plus finish. And whether that's right or wrong, that's debatable. But we've adopted a different whole model. Cultural displacement now. Our levels, people, inferiority complex. We don't have our. In fact, if you want a very good book on the Western education system, there's a book called Learning by Gatchel. Name is Gatchel, John Gatchel. There's also another book called Weapons of Mass Education. Weapons of Mass Education. Two very good books. Cultural displacement. Look how it's happening to us. We are losing our culture. The only thing that we have left in our culture is biryani. You understand me? That's the only thing that we have left in our culture. Yeah, and unfortunately, food, that's not really going to help us in the world. We don't need to, we have to copy the Western way of living, clothing, transportation. Not saying it's wrong, it's not sure it's going to happen. Remember, Ibn Khaldun says the dominating, we've always tried to follow in the dominator. Cultural displacement, colonial psychological demand, cultural displacement, read what Ali Isabegowicz says in the end of his book. He's got a whole section of books. Colonial psychological impact again. Because they were our masters, we still feel we have those things inside. And we feel that they are better than us. Next. All right, so scientific decline, economic dependence, political weakness. These are 3 things that are causing decline across multiple domains. Again, a lot of these are repeated. Next. Okay, now, these are some of the figures, and these images are, but these are some of the figures who try to come out with a solution. Whether you agree with them or not is different. The point is, they try to write something to counter the problems Muslims are going through. Yeah, so these are famous. Some of these names you might know, some you might not know, and this is not exhaustive. There are more than this. The next. Okay, so the key message of revival movements: return to foundational sources. That's what we have to do. We have to revive Islamic identity. We have to strengthen grassroots foundations and restructure society. It's a big task, but we have to start from somewhere. At the moment, we are basically like a band-aid. Into your sound, people are band-aid. We're not coming out with a holistic solution. So this is what Isaac Begovic mentions. In terms of foundational sources, revive supplementarity, strengthen grassroots, restructure society again. Now, this is going to come overnight. It might take 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. But remember what Rasul said, If the day of judgment comes and you are planting a seed, carry on plant. Carry on, you do your thing. Because if you are not successful, at least you did your part for success. Yes. Now, Islam's model global roadmap. So, what do we have? What do we have to understand? What's my role today as a Muslim? So, we know that there's a global world now. So, we have to have a global presence. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. We are global. Whether we like it or not, we are not only for Pakistan. We are not only for Karachi. We are for the whole world. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab was for the whole world. Sayyidina Ali was for the whole world. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz for the whole world. At their time, for the whole world. Today, we have to create a presence. Digital dawah. I personally think digital dawah, we have to be involved in digital dawah. Because if we're silent, other people will take the position, fill the void, and later will cry. Resurgence of dawah, we need to have a very strong way of dawah. Now, that dawah does not mean you just give people Qur'ans and you stand and give leaders. No. We have to schools have dawah. Universities have dawah. And the emergence of ethical leaders. Again, these are very broad terms. They require a lot of thinking. Okay, so the path forward, renewed faith, unity, knowledge, action. This is just summing up. Okay, next one. Okay, 1,400 years of rise and 400 of revival. So, divine origins. So, this is basically what we're going to historically. Historically, we're going to this. Sahaba's days. Divine origins. Golden age, the peak. Imperial age, the decline. The Ottomans, the Mughals, and modern revival. Now, in a situation, we are at the bottom of the bottom. The only way for us to go up there. Now, think about this. Alhamdulillah, nearly all countries in the Muslim world today have come out of colonialism. For the first time, we have Muslim entrepreneurs in Pakistan. For the first time, we have thinkers in Pakistan that are emerging. Whether you agree with them or disagree is a different thing. But we have to understand the God. If it wasn't for, the individuals in Pakistan who deserve the nuclear power, you wouldn't be a nuclear power. So you have this love for Allah and Rasul and deserving the Muslim. So alhamdulillah, but this is where we are right now. Next. Now, this is where I want to talk about. I do apologize. I'm going to go slightly above, not too much. Just maybe 5 minutes from here. I'm going to tell you a bit of history, okay? So we're going to start from here. So imagine 14 steps. This is the history, 14 steps. So what happened in the beginning was this. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sent to Makkah. For 22 years, he makes an effort. Unimaginable that people living in the desert will come out with such a way of life that will even be talked about for 1,400 years' time. This was going to happen. Sahaba, who some of them had no status, were going to be leaders of society. Yeah? Rasul Sallallahu passes away. Decision is made for Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu to become Khalifa. He becomes Khalifa for 2 years. This is only the first step. 2 years he's Khalifa. He dies. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu becomes Khalifa now. He chooses him. 11 years he becomes Khalifa. Sayyidina Umar spreads Islam now. Pushes Islam sideways, pushes Islam up and down. All of Arabian Peninsula, or we call Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen, all becomes Muslim. Palestine becomes Muslim without a fight. They give it to Sayyidina Umar. Iraq becomes under Islamic rule. They do not have to change their religion. But it's under Islamic rule. What's the point of Islamic rule? So they oversee justice. They allow them to be Christian. They allow them to be Jew. They allow them to whatever religion you want. But do not break the rules. And then Sayyidina Umar is martyred. Then Osman radiallahu anhu becomes Khalifa. 13 years is Khalifa. Islam spreads to North Africa slowly. Islam spreads to Azerbaijan. Islam starts to come all the way towards Pakistan. Sayyidina Umar is martyred by his own people, Muslims. First time a leader is killed by a Muslim in his own house, 20 steps from the road of Rasul. Sayyidina Ali doesn't become the Khalifa. He doesn't go after the murderers. He wants to stabilize everything. Sayyidina Aisha and others, Muawiyah, are saying, no, you have to find the murderer. He's saying, wait, 2 battles take place between the Sahaba. The Battle of Zaman and the Battle of Siffin. Unfortunately, many were killed on both sides. Then Sayyidina Ali was killed, martyred, shaheed. Hassan radiallahu anhu out in the same step. The year 40, he becomes Khalifa for 6 months. He abdicates, gives it up. Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu anhu becomes the Khalifa for 20 years. Islam spread all the way up to Spain. Islam spread all the way down up to Pakistan. This is in the Umayyah. 14 Khalifas of Banu Umayyah from Sayyidina Muawiyah all the way up to Sabah. 14 Khalifas. In this time, they sent Muhammad bin Fasil to Karachi. Yeah. He was actually in prison later. And they go north, all the way to China. They go all the way to Spain, Jabal Tariq, long history over there. Then Khalifa Abbasis come. The problem was the Abbasis hated Umayyads. The Abbasis slaughtered Umayyads. Muslims killing their own Muslims. The peak happened in the Umayyads and then declined. Have you seen in Masjid al-Aqsa, Dome of the Rock, Golden Dome? This is the only building that existed from the Umayyads time. Everything else was destroyed because of earthquakes. And this was built by Abdul Malik bin Marwan. Anyway, Umayyads finish. Banu Abbas becomes Khalifa. Their Khilafah lasts from the year 132 all the way up to 600, but they go through cycles. Harun Rashid is the first Khalifa who appoints a judge, ultimate judge, Chief Justice, and he chooses Abu Yusuf, who is the student of Imam Ali. So the Hanafi madhab, it takes the role of governance, judicial system, for hundreds of years now. Anyone who wants to become a judge or a Mufti has to learn the Hanafi madhab. Hanafi madhab spreads. Books are written. And I told you about the foreign policy books, because the government needed them. Right? They needed books on economy. The first books on economy were written. And then slowly what happened is, the Banu Abbas become in decline. Now, Ma'mun Rashid, I told you, Bayt al-Hikmah. Unfortunately, he forces the ulama to accept his version of Islam. And whoever does not accept was killed. That's why famous story of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal with Ma'mun Rashid. Anyway, Ma'mun Rashid, he dies, many others come. Then they came, interesting, a Shia group called the Banu Buwayh. So the Banu Buwayh came in the fourth step. Yeah, third, fourth step. So the Banu Buwayh were the first Shia group who became Khalifa. Now, interestingly enough, Al-Qur'an al-Jibabani says the Shia were never ever meant to be leaders. You know what? Because the Shia believe in 12 Imams. And they say the last Imam has disappeared. And you can't have a government without the Imam. So until he comes back, they can't rule. That's their own book says. So what happened, these people wouldn't go in for about 100 years. They took over about that. Then what happened was the Seljuks came. Seljuks are the early Ottomans, the early Turks, important Turks. You know Portugal. So before Portugal, there used to be a group called the Seljuk. So the Seljuks, they came, they took back Baghdad, and the Seljuks time was when Imam Ghazali came, in the 5th step. Now back in the 3rd step, this is where in Egypt, the Fatimids, they took over Egypt, the Ismailis. Ismailis are like esoteric version of Shias. Shias, many of them, they don't consider them Muslim. So from 300 all the way up to 600, they were ruling Egypt. But again, they went to formation, decline. Yeah. You know, go back to Imam Ghazali's time. So Imam Ghazali's time, this is where Salahuddin Ayyubi comes. Salahuddin Ayyubi now is very famous. He takes from the Crusades, takes back Palestine, and he brings the Ummah together. At the same time, he brings all the non-Muslims together in Europe, unified for them. Then Ayyubis only last for maybe 100 years. Then they die out because of nepotism. Then come the Mamluk in Egypt. The Mamluks were ex-slaves. They take over, and they take over maybe 200 years, 300 years. In this time, many famous scholars came about. So, I don't know if you ever heard of Muhyiddin al-Arabi, Imam Rumi. Many of these individuals came about in this time, Mamluks time. And many different types of areas of Islamic sciences also developed. Arabic grammar, fiqh, aqidah. And unfortunately, there were also many frictions between Muslims and Arabs. This was an interesting time. Okay. Then what happens is this. The Ottomans now, they appear now. So roughly the same time, Spain falls, Spain disappears now. Yeah. But at the same time, Allah gives the Ottomans. And the Osmanlis started off like a gang. Fighting. You take over one village, take over one city. And then what happens is, unfortunately, the Ottomans, they had to fight against the Timur Lane. You know Timur Lane? They had to fight against him as well. So the Muslims, because they're fighting each other over here, they couldn't send people to Spain to protect the Muslims over here. If there was no internal fighting over here, Muslims may have been able to protect Spain. This is what happens, Muslims fight. So anyway, the Ottomans, Muhammad al-Fatih comes. Muhammad al-Fatih, he comes roughly 8 steps ahead. He takes over, God takes over. This is the Makkah of Christians. Like we have Makkah, their Kaaba. So if you have Hagia Sophia, this was like the holiest place on earth for Muslims taking that. And then the Ottomans now, they last all the way until 100 years ago. Now, at the same time, you have the Safavids now. So the Safavids, these were the second group of Shia in history, who was starting off with a man called Ismail. He was a Sunni. He became Shia, and he spread Shia ideology. And remember, the Shias do not have leadership. They have to wait for their Imam to appear. So what he did was, he used violence to spread Shiaism all the way until modern day Iran. So modern day Iran today is an offshoot of the Safavids. So Safavids are the second Shia group in history that had an administration. And the third was Khomeini. So Khomeini was the third Shia revolutionist. Historically, besides these three, we do not have any Shias who had governance. Everything else has been Sunni. And finally, the Mughal. As you know, the Mughal started off with Babur. Babur was actually, so Timur Lane, over here, his grandson or great grandson, went from Uzbekistan, took over Kabul, went all the way to Pakistan, went to India, and he started taking over all these places from other Muslims. And eventually, then you had Akbar came. Akbar began to mix Islam with other things, come out with a different version. And then you had, many of the other revolutionists that came. Unfortunately, what you see is what happened at the end of the Mughal Empire buildings, Taj Mahal, Shah Jahan. And that's what they had mentioned. Everything from inside became so weak. When the British came, the British were able to dismantle everything the Muslims had, simply because the Muslims were weak. And eventually we ended up with the past.